My mother put her phone face down on the kitchen table so hard the silverware jumped. "Fix this, Erin." She looked like she had not slept. But neither had I. Less than 12 hours earlier, my younger sister Haley had been smiling beneath strings of white lights, while photographs I had taken over 15 years filled a screen behind her, one after another, as if I had somehow photographed an entire family I had never belonged to. Now, one of the businesses interested in working with Haley wanted an explanation about where those photographs had come from. Erin was nowhere in my parents' house, and Haley had locked herself away from everyone. My father leaned against the counter and said, "We can still keep this in the family." Mom stared at me as if I had created the disaster instead of finally refusing to clean it up. "You've made your point," she said. I looked at both of them and answered, "I hadn't made my point yet. Before I tell you what happened in that ballroom, I hope you're doing well wherever you're listening from, because the part that shocked everyone at my sister's wedding actually began 6 months earlier with something so small, I almost dismissed it. Stay with me, because every little detail mattered by the end. And if you enjoy stories about families discovering that the person they underestimated was paying attention all along, subscribe to the channel and keep listening. What looked like a fight over family photographs became something much larger once I understood why someone needed those photographs separated from my name. It was October of the previous year, and I was 39, sitting at the desk in my Raleigh apartment with a mug of coffee. I had reheated twice and still forgotten to drink. Photography had been my real job for years, not the little hobby my mother sometimes made it sound like when she was introducing me to people. I photographed families, small businesses, editorial projects, and ordinary lives for clients who wanted something more honest than everyone standing in a line and smiling at the same time. I also ran a photography blog called Ordinary Light. It was never famous in the way people use that word online, but it had been around for more than a decade, and enough photographers followed it that I occasionally met people at assignments who knew my work before they knew me. That morning, I was finishing a photo essay for a client when a notice arrived from the hosting service I used for several older galleries. One family gallery had been temporarily restricted, while the service reviewed a privacy complaint from someone shown in the photographs. It was not a copyright claim, and it did not mean the person filing it owned anything. It meant someone had told the service they were uncomfortable with the gallery remaining accessible, and the service had restricted the share link while it reviewed the complaint. I read the notice twice, checked which gallery it concerned, then opened my archive instead of calling anyone in anger. The gallery was an old Thanksgiving series from years earlier. There were photographs of my parents carrying food into the dining room, Haley laughing while she tried to keep our cousin Leah from stealing a roll from a basket, Aunt Melissa pretending she did not notice me photographing her, and several images of my father asleep after dinner with one hand still curled around a television remote. Nobody had ever treated those photographs as secret. My relatives had shared links to them, requested prints, used them as phone backgrounds, and asked me for copies over the years. Still, if someone had changed their mind, I was willing to deal with that directly. I restricted the rest of the gallery from public browsing, saved the notice with my correspondence, and sent the host a short message asking what specific image or person the complaint concerned. Then I called my mother. Laura answered on the fourth ring and sounded distracted. In the background, I could hear paper moving and what sounded like a television. I asked whether anyone in the family had recently told her they were uncomfortable with photographs on Ordinary Light. She paused just long enough for me to notice. "A few people have mentioned things," she said. "Who?" "Oh, Erin, I'm not keeping a list." "I'm not asking you to keep a list. I'm asking who has a problem so I can talk to them." She sighed. My mother had a particular sigh reserved for moments when she wanted a reasonable request to sound exhausting. People don't always want a confrontation. Calling me and asking me to remove a picture isn't a confrontation. You know how intense you get about your work? I leaned back in my chair. "Mom, if somebody wants something removed, tell them to contact me. Please don't speak for them." There was another pause. Then she said, "Haley already has enough stress with the wedding. Don't turn this into another family drama before April." I had not mentioned Haley. That was the first thing that bothered me. Not enough to accuse anyone. Not enough even to write Haley's name in the spreadsheet I would eventually build. It was only a small mental mark, the kind I had trained myself to make as a photographer when something entered a frame that did not quite belong. A hand reaching toward something. A face looking in the wrong direction. A reflection in a window that told a different story from the people standing in front of it. I told Mom again that anyone with a concern could contact me directly, ended the call, and went back to work. 2 days later, I drove to my parents' house to pick up an old lens case I had left there and scan a family print for a relative. They lived less than half an hour from me in normal traffic, in the same house where Haley and I had spent most of our childhood. Dad was clearing a closet in the spare bedroom when I arrived. Patrick had never believed in throwing away an object if there was the slightest possibility someone might need it in the next 20 years. So cleaning one of his closets usually meant moving things from one shelf to another. He was sitting on the floor surrounded by cables, old photo boxes, chargers for phones nobody owned anymore, and several hard drives I recognized from different eras of my career. He held up a scratched gray external drive. "You still want this old thing?" I knew it immediately. It contained an older copy of my family archive, most of it from before I had tightened up my backup system. Everything important existed elsewhere in my cloud storage and newer drives, which was why I had never been in a hurry to retrieve it. "Yeah, leave it there for now. I'll take it after the wedding when things calm down." Dad turned it over in his hand. "Thought you had all this backed up." "I do." "Then why keep it?" "Because photographers don't throw away archives just because we have another copy." He smiled as if that confirmed something amusing about me and set the drive back on the closet shelf. Beside it were several old photo books. I pulled one out and found photographs from when Haley had been a teenager. I remembered her sitting beside me while I edited those years ago, asking why I chose one frame over another when 2 pictures looked almost identical to her. She used to love scrolling through my contact sheets. Sometimes she would point to a picture and say, "That one," and wait to see whether I chose the same one. I had always thought that was sweet. At the time, it never occurred to me that admiration could change shape without disappearing. The second notice arrived 2 days after that. Different gallery, similar complaint. This one concerned photographs from a summer cookout, and the gallery again featured Haley heavily, along with Mom. I restricted the link, downloaded the correspondence, and opened a spreadsheet. I made columns for the date, gallery, wording of the complaint, available sender information, what action the host had taken, and what I had done in response. It was not paranoia. It was how I worked whenever something complicated touched my business. People misremember conversations. Email threads get buried. Platforms change what they display. A timeline does not care how emotional everybody becomes later. The wording bothered me more than the existence of a second complaint. The first had said that private family moments did not belong online. The second said almost the same thing, with 2 words changed. That could have been coincidence. Families repeat one another all the time, especially when they have already discussed a subject privately. I highlighted the matching language anyway, and saved both notices in a separate folder. Looking back now, that spreadsheet was the first thing I did that Haley should have been afraid of. At the time, I thought I was simply being careful. I had no idea I was building the first page of the timeline that would eventually make it impossible for her to explain away what she had done. Haley called that evening. My sister was 27 and could make concern sound effortless. She had always been good with people in a way I was not. She remembered birthdays without reminders, knew when someone needed a compliment, and could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with 3 invitations to dinner. None of those things made her stupid or shallow. In fact, one of my mistakes was assuming that because I understood files, dates, contracts, and visual work better than she did, I understood the situation better too. "Mom told me about the photo thing," she said. "Of course she did. Don't be like that. I'm checking on you." "I'm fine. I just know you get really protective about ordinary light." I looked at the screen in front of me. Someone made complaints. The host is reviewing them. That's all. Are you taking the older family galleries down for good? The question was too specific. I had told Mom I restricted one gallery. I had not told Haley I was considering what to do with the older ones as a group, because I was not considering that yet. Why would I? She hesitated. Barely. I don't know. Maybe it's time. For what? To let some of that stuff go. You've used those pictures already, right? They've been on the blog forever. That doesn't make them disposable. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I heard her breathe out through her nose. Erin, I'm trying to be nice. Maybe everybody doesn't want their life living on your website forever. Then everybody is welcome to tell me that. You always make things so formal. No, I make my work formal. There's a difference. She gave a small laugh. Not warm enough to be affectionate, not sharp enough to be openly hostile. They're just family pictures. I stared at the dark reflection of my own face in the monitor for a second. They're my photographs. If someone wants one removed, they can ask me. Haley changed the subject after that. She talked about the wedding venue, a florist who had changed the price of something, and a seating issue involving one of Erin's relatives. By the time we hung up, she sounded like my younger sister again, busy and mildly overwhelmed and completely uninterested in my blog. That should have reassured me. It did not. I opened the spreadsheet again and added a note beside the second complaint. Haley asked whether old family galleries were being taken down permanently. I did not call it evidence. It was not evidence. It was simply a fact I did not want to forget. The next week passed without another notice. I worked. I delivered the photo essay. I met a couple in Durham for an anniversary session and spent an entire cold morning waiting for their 6-year-old daughter to stop performing for the camera long enough to become herself. Ordinary light continued running. Nothing collapsed. If you had asked me then whether I believed someone in my family was deliberately trying to damage my work, I would have said no. I would have said families were messy. People talked. Someone probably copied someone else's wording, because they had discussed the same concern. I would have said I had backups, originals, publication records, and enough experience to handle a couple of complaints without turning Thanksgiving photographs into a conspiracy. That was my blind spot. I trusted evidence so much that I underestimated what people could accomplish before evidence became necessary. Then the third complaint arrived. This one involved another older family gallery, and the sender's name was partially visible in the notice. I recognized it as a cousin who had never once asked me to remove a photograph. The complaint used the same phrase again. Private family moments. Do not belong online. I emailed my cousin directly. I kept the message simple. I told her I had received a complaint involving a gallery she appeared in, asked which photographs concerned her, and offered to restrict specific images while we discussed it. She did not answer. The host did not tell me more than its policy allowed. I did not push beyond what I was entitled to know. I saved the correspondence, updated the spreadsheet, and pulled the first 2 complaints onto my screen beside the third. 3 messages. 3 supposedly separate concerns. 3 versions of almost the same language. There was something else about that sentence that had been scratching at the back of my mind, and now, seeing it 3 times in a row, I finally knew why. Years earlier, Aunt Melissa had been furious about one photograph I posted after a family barbecue. She had called me directly, told me exactly which image she hated, and demanded I remove it. I had taken it down that same afternoon. Before hanging up, Melissa had said a sentence I remembered because she delivered it like a final ruling. Private family moments do not belong online. I sat very still, looking from one complaint to the next. Until that moment, I had been asking why several people suddenly wanted the same kinds of photographs removed. Now I had a different question. Why were several people suddenly speaking in Aunt Melissa's exact words? I spent the next morning doing something I should have done years earlier. I went through every family gallery on Ordinary Light and made a list of what permission had actually looked like when I posted them. Not what I assumed everyone remembered. Not what Mom would later claim. What I could document. In the early years, most of it had been informal. I would take pictures at Thanksgiving, send the family a link, and somebody would text back asking for a print. Haley had reposted photographs of herself from my blog more times than I could count. Mom had sent links to friends. Dad had ordered framed copies for his office. Cousins had used images as profile pictures. Nobody had signed a release for every family dinner, because I had never treated those gatherings like commercial shoots. They were my family, and for a long time I had trusted ordinary consent to stay ordinary. That did not mean I ignored people when they changed their minds. I found exactly 3 cases in more than a decade where someone had directly asked me to remove or restrict a photograph. One was Aunt Melissa. One was a cousin who had gone through a divorce and no longer wanted an old anniversary picture public. The third involved a friend of Haley's who had been in the background of a graduation series and did not like the way she looked. In all 3 cases, I had handled it within a day. No argument, no lecture about artistic ownership, no demand that anyone justify why they suddenly felt differently. I could be stubborn about my work, but I had never believed taking a photograph gave me the right to ignore the people inside it. That distinction mattered to me enough that I changed my process that morning. From then on, anything new involving relatives would require a simple written confirmation before I posted it publicly. A text was enough. An email was enough. I did not need legal language. I needed a record that said, yes, I knew this was going online. I also created a private folder for family work that would never touch my professional sample galleries unless there was a clear reason. It annoyed me that I had to do it, but annoyance was not the same thing as guilt. I could admit my old system had been too casual without accepting the story Mom and Haley were beginning to tell, which was that I had somehow spent years treating everyone around me like raw material. The first time the problem touched an actual client, I was standing in a grocery store trying to decide whether I wanted soup or the illusion that I was going to cook something more ambitious. My phone buzzed with a message from a woman named Claire, whose family I had photographed the previous spring. She was not angry. That almost made it worse. She said she had clicked one of the sample links I had sent when we first discussed her session, because a friend of hers was looking for a photographer, but the page was unavailable. Then she asked whether there was some issue with the images, or whether I had changed how I handled usage rights. I left my cart beside the canned tomatoes and called her. There's no issue with your photographs, I said. An older family gallery I used as part of a sample collection is under a privacy review with the host. I should have separated the two more cleanly. I'm sending you a different portfolio link now. Claire was quiet for a second. So nobody is claiming your client work isn't yours? No. Okay. I only asked because the page made it sound like there was a dispute. I know, I'm fixing that. She laughed lightly. I wasn't trying to interrogate you. I know you weren't. She recommended me to her friend anyway. Nothing catastrophic happened. I did not lose a contract. Nobody posted about me online. But when I got home, I removed every family gallery from any active professional sample path and replaced them with commissioned work I could document from end to end. It took me 3 hours, and I resented every minute of it because I knew exactly what had caused the extra work. By then, 3 complaints existed. 3 people had supposedly become uncomfortable at almost the same time, using language that sounded like it had come from the same mouth. Haley texted me the next day and asked if I wanted lunch. That was unusual enough that I stared at the message for a while before answering. We were not estranged then. We saw each other at family events, exchanged birthday messages, occasionally met for coffee, and could spend 2 hours together without arguing. But we were not the kind of sisters who spontaneously had lunch in the middle of a work week. Haley lived closer to downtown with Aaron, and most of our one-on-one conversations happened because one of us needed something specific. She picked a restaurant with a bright dining room and tiny tables packed too close together. By the time I arrived, she had already ordered sparkling water and was scrolling through wedding invitations on her phone. She looked polished even when she claimed she had been running errands all morning. Haley had always understood presentation instinctively. She could make a cheap dress look deliberate, a rushed party look effortless, and a sentence that should have sounded insulting come out wrapped in concern. I heard one of your work links got affected, she said after we ordered. Mom told you? Mom tells me everything lately. Wedding planning has apparently made me her emergency contact for the entire family. That sounds exhausting. She smiled. It is. But I wanted to make sure you weren't freaking out. I'm not. I would be. That's why I separate panic from paperwork. She rolled her eyes in a way that used to make me laugh. You know what I mean. If people were reporting something tied to my work, I'd take it personally. I'm taking it seriously, that's different. Haley folded her hands around her glass. Maybe that's part of the problem. I waited. She looked down, then back at me with the expression she used when she wanted to sound reluctant to say something. A few people feel like you turned family life into your aesthetic. The phrase was so neat that I almost admired it. My aesthetic. You know what I mean. No, actually. Explain it, she sighed. Erin, don't do that thing where you make every word sound like testimony. I'm asking what you mean. She leaned closer. You've photographed everything for years. Birthdays, holidays, people crying, people exhausted, mom cooking, dad asleep, me looking awful at 16. At some point, maybe not everybody wants those moments living on a photography site. Who? I'm not going to put people on the spot. Then don't speak for them. Her mouth tightened. This is why people don't come to you. There it was. Not a scream, not an accusation, just a sentence placed carefully between us. I could have defended myself. I could have listed every relative who had asked for prints, every person who had shared my work, every family member who had used those same photographs for Christmas cards and anniversary posts. Instead, I asked the question that mattered. Do you have a problem with any photograph of you on ordinary light? Haley blinked. Because if you do, I continued, tell me which one. She looked away toward the window. No, I'm not filing anything against you. That wasn't my question. I'm answering it. No, I don't have some secret complaint. Do you want me to remove your photographs? She shook her head. I don't care enough to make this into a thing. I remember that sentence exactly, because months later, Haley would tell people she had objected to my use of family images for years. At that table, when I gave her a direct opportunity to tell me she wanted her photographs down, she said no. Our food arrived, and Haley changed the subject almost immediately. She talked about the wedding, a disagreement with the venue over candles, and a flower arrangement Mom thought looked cheap, even though it cost more than my first camera. I let her talk. At one point, she showed me a color palette on her phone. Cream, muted green, warm brown, faded gold. Everything soft and expensive looking, without actually being flashy. You've always been good at this, I said. At spending money? At knowing how you want something to look. She smiled. See? I do have talents. I never said you didn't. The smile stayed, but something behind it changed. At the time, I did not understand why that exchange mattered. I only knew that Haley had come to lunch, claiming she wanted to check on me, then spent most of the conversation trying to persuade me that unnamed people had been uncomfortable for years. When I asked for names, she refused. When I asked about her own photographs, she denied having a problem. By the time we left, I had learned almost nothing I could prove, but I had learned something about the shape of the pressure being applied to me. It was always everybody. Never anyone. That afternoon I called Melissa. Aunt Melissa had been my first suspect because of the wording, but I did not want to accuse her over a sentence she had used years ago. I told her I had received several privacy complaints that contained a phrase I remembered from our old argument and asked whether she had recently raised concerns about my blog with anyone. For 3 full seconds, she said nothing. Then she said, "Are you asking if I reported you?" "I'm asking if you talked to anyone about reporting me." That sounds like the same question dressed up. Did you? Melissa made a sharp sound under her breath. I asked you to remove one picture of me years ago. You removed it. Why would I suddenly start filing complaints now? I don't know, that's why I called. Well, maybe other people finally got tired of being photographed. Maybe. Did anyone ask you about old galleries recently? The pause that followed was different from the first one. Melissa? I don't want to be dragged into whatever is happening between you and your mother. That pulled me upright. I didn't mention Mom. You don't have to. What did she ask you? I said I don't want to be involved. I'm not asking you to take sides. In this family, that's usually what people mean right before they ask you to take sides. Her voice had gone defensive, but not frightened. Melissa was not a woman who frightened easily. If anything, her refusal made me more suspicious. Did you file a complaint? I asked again. No. Did you ask someone else to file one for you? No. Did you give anyone permission to use your name? No. Then why are you avoiding the rest of the question? She exhaled slowly. Because I'm 50, 2 years old, and I've learned that when your sister starts using the word everyone, the safest place to stand is somewhere else. I almost asked her what that meant. She ended the call before I could. For the rest of that afternoon, Melissa moved to the top of my mental list. Not because I thought she was lying about filing a complaint herself. I believed her when she said she would have confronted me directly. That was exactly what she had done before. But she clearly knew something had been discussed, and she clearly did not want to tell me what. The 4th complaint arrived the following morning. The 5th came less than 2 days later. By then, I stopped thinking of them as separate events. I printed the text of all 5 notices and laid them across my dining table. The hosts had redacted some identifying details because each complaint had been submitted under its privacy process, but the language was visible. 3 opened with nearly identical sentences. 2 used the phrase "private family moments do not belong online." 4 referred to the images as family property. That phrase bothered me because photographs are not family property just because the people in them share DNA. But I did not need a copyright lecture to see the more immediate problem. 5 supposedly independent people did not naturally write complaints with matching structure unless they had discussed what to say. I highlighted repeated phrases in yellow. I circled dates. Then I looked at the names I could identify. One of them belonged to a cousin named Daniel, who had never once complained to me about a photograph. I emailed him directly. Hi, Daniel. I received a privacy request involving an older gallery you appear in. I'm happy to restrict specific images if there's something you're uncomfortable with. Can you tell me which photograph concerns you? He read the message that afternoon. He did not reply. 2 days later, still nothing. I did not chase him. I added the date to my spreadsheet and moved on. That was around the time Mom called again. I was editing at my desk when her name appeared on my screen. I almost let it go to voicemail, not because I was avoiding her, but because every conversation lately seemed to end with me being told to solve a problem nobody would define. I answered anyway. If 4 people are saying the same thing, she said, after less than a minute of small talk, maybe stop treating everyone like they're wrong. My hand stopped on the mouse. 4? What? You said 4 people. Yes. How do you know there are 4 complaints? Silence. Not long. Maybe half a second. But once you spend enough years photographing people, half a second becomes a very long time. I don't know the exact number, she said. You just gave me the exact number. Haley said she'd heard from several relatives. That's not what I asked. Mom's voice hardened. Why are you interrogating me? I'm not. I'm asking how you know what happened on my account. I don't know what happened on your account. Then where did 4 come from? Oh my God, Erin, maybe it was 3, maybe it was 5. This is exactly what Haley means when she says you turn everything into an investigation. I leaned back. What does Haley know about the complaints? People talk to her. Which people? I am not giving you names so you can start calling everyone. I've already called the people whose names I have. That is unbelievable. No, Mom, what's unbelievable is that apparently half the family has a problem with my photographs. But nobody can tell me which photographs they want removed. They shouldn't have to defend wanting privacy. They don't. They only have to tell me what they want private. She went quiet again. Then she said, You always think if you can document something, you understand it. That one landed harder than I expected, because there was enough truth in it to sting. Maybe I did rely too much on documentation. Maybe I liked problems that could be reduced to dates, files, and direct questions because people were harder. People could say one thing, mean another, repeat somebody else's fear until it sounded like their own, or decide after 10 years that they had always hated something they had once proudly shared. But the fact that I had a blind spot did not make Mom's answers less strange. I'll handle it, I said. You say that like we're the problem. I didn't say that. You don't have to. She hung up angry. I opened my spreadsheet and wrote one line beneath that day's date. Laura knew the complaint count before I told her. I did not add an interpretation. I did not write that Haley had told her. I did not write that Mom was involved. I wrote only what I knew. That evening, I finally did something I had avoided, because it felt too much like treating my family as a data set. I compared the reported galleries side by side. I expected the pattern to be personal. Maybe the most intimate photographs. Maybe the ones where people were crying, exhausted, drunk, grieving, or simply caught in moments they no longer wanted public. That was not what I found. The Thanksgiving gallery under review had some of the warmest images I had ever made of Haley. There was one of her laughing, with her head tilted back while steam rose from a tray behind her. Another showed her leaning across the kitchen island while Mom reached past her for a serving spoon. The light came through the side window at exactly the right angle, turning an ordinary kitchen into something almost cinematic. The summer cookout gallery had Haley under string lights with a glass of lemonade in her hand, children running behind her, everything soft and golden around the edges. Another flagged gallery was from a lakeside weekend, where Haley wore a white shirt and sat barefoot at the end of a dock. The series had a consistent palette, clean compositions, and enough visual continuity that I had once used 3 frames in a talk about photographing family stories without forcing people to pose. Then I opened galleries nobody had complained about. One contained a tense Christmas dinner where Dad looked irritated in half the frames, and Melissa was visibly crying in the background of one picture. Untouched. Another had Haley after a breakup, wearing sweatpants and glaring at me over a coffee cup. Untouched. A third showed Mom with her hair wet after rain, carrying garbage bags into a rented cabin because the roof had leaked. Untouched. If privacy were the real concern, those should have been the first images anyone wanted hidden. Instead, someone seemed interested in the photographs where the family looked cohesive, warm, aspirational. And especially the photographs where Haley looked like she belonged at the center of that world. I sat at my dining table until after midnight, moving gallery names into different columns. Strong visual sequence. Haley prominent. Warm palette. Family milestone. Reusable as standalone image. I hated the words reusable as soon as I typed them because they implied an intention I had no proof existed. Still, the pattern was there. The reported galleries were not the most private. They were the most useful. That changed the question again. If someone simply wanted family photographs removed, why were they choosing images the way a creative director might choose a portfolio? The answer did not arrive that night. It arrived 3 days later while I was brushing my teeth. My phone was on the bathroom counter when Instagram opened to a story Leah had reposted from Haley's public account. Haley had started a wedding countdown. Nothing strange about that. There were flowers, fabric samples, stationery, venue details, and quick flashes of a mood board arranged across a table. I almost tapped past it. Then my thumb stopped. I went backward. The story had already moved on to a video of Haley holding up ribbon, but I replayed the previous slide and froze the screen. In the lower right corner of the mood board was a cropped photograph of a woman laughing in a warm kitchen while another figure reached across the frame. I knew the light. I knew the angle. I knew the photograph because I had taken it. It was from the Thanksgiving gallery currently hidden under review. I took a screenshot before the story disappeared. For several seconds, I just stared at it, trying to be fair. It was a wedding mood board. Haley was in the photograph. Maybe she had saved it years ago. Maybe she liked the color palette. Maybe she had no idea the image was currently one of the photographs someone was trying to get removed from my site. All of that was possible. But one fact had changed. Until then, Haley had been the person telling me other people were uncomfortable with my work. Now she was publicly using one of the exact images those supposed concerns had pushed offline. And for the first time, I stopped asking only who had filed the complaints. I started asking what Haley needed those photographs for. By then, I had enough pieces to be suspicious, and not enough to accuse anyone without sounding exactly the way Haley seemed to want me to sound. That distinction mattered. I could walk into my mother's kitchen, throw 5 complaint notices on the table, point at the repeated language, and demand explanations. I could call Haley and ask why one of the photographs under review had appeared on her wedding mood board. But suspicion is useful only while the other person does not know exactly what you know, and I had already learned that every direct question I asked somehow made its way through the family within hours. So instead of calling Haley, I called Aunt Melissa again and asked if she would meet me for coffee. She chose a place halfway between our homes on a gray Saturday morning in November. Melissa was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a black coffee and the expression of a woman who had come prepared to be irritated. She did not hug me. She pointed at the chair across from her and said, "If this is another interrogation, I'm leaving." It isn't. That's what interrogators say. I sat down and took a folded sheet of paper from my bag. "I want to show you something before I ask anything." Her eyes dropped to the page. I had printed the wording from the complaints without any names attached. I had highlighted the phrase I recognized from our argument years earlier. "Private family moments do not belong online." Melissa read it, then looked at me. "You remember saying that?" "Of course I remember saying that. You posted a picture of me looking like I'd been dragged behind a truck. You were carrying a casserole. I looked terrible. You called me. I removed it." "Yes. Did you ask anyone else to file complaints against my galleries?" Her face hardened immediately. "No. Did you tell anyone else to?" "No." "Did you give Haley permission to use that wording?" That changed something. It was small. Her shoulders stayed where they were, but her fingers stopped moving around the coffee cup. She looked down at the highlighted sentence again. "Why are you asking me about Haley?" "Because she used one of the images from a restricted gallery on her public wedding mood board." Melissa's eyes lifted. "And because several complaints use your exact phrase," I continued. "I'm not accusing you. I'm asking whether somebody talked to you about my old galleries before these complaints started." Melissa leaned back and stared at me for a long moment. "Your mother is going to kill me." "That isn't an answer." "No, Erin, she isn't literally going to kill me. Don't put that in your spreadsheet." Despite myself, I almost smiled. "Did Haley contact you?" Melissa picked up her phone. That was the moment I knew my suspicion had been aimed at the wrong person. She scrolled for several seconds, then turned the screen toward me. The message thread was from late August, weeks before the first complaint reached my host. Haley's name sat at the top. "Can you send me screenshots of any old galleries Erin still has up? Mom thinks some of them need to come down before the wedding." I read it twice. "What did you send her?" "One screenshot. Maybe two. I thought Laura was cleaning up old family stuff." "What does cleaning up old family stuff mean?" Melissa shrugged. "Your mother gets weird before major events. She starts deciding what photographs should exist, which relatives should sit together, who needs to be warned not to drink too much." I assumed this was the digital version. "Did Mom ask you herself?" "No, Haley did." "Keep scrolling." "Melissa did." A few messages later, Haley had sent her a paragraph. "If you're uncomfortable with any of the old galleries, you can send a request through the host." Something like, "These are private family moments, and I'm no longer comfortable with them being publicly available. I'm asking for the gallery to be restricted while this is reviewed." Below it, Haley had added, "You can change the wording, obviously." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Melissa watched my face. "I didn't send it," she said. "Why not?" "Because if I want you to take something down, I call you and tell you to take it down. We've already established that." I looked at the thread again. "Did she send this only to you?" "I don't know. Did you ask?" "No. At the time I didn't think it mattered." I handed the phone back. "Can you forward me the entire conversation?" Melissa hesitated. "I'm not posting it anywhere." "That's not what I'm worried about." "What are you worried about?" She looked toward the window. "Being the person who lights the match. The fire already exists. You sound like your father when you say things like that. That is deeply insulting." This time she smiled, but it disappeared almost immediately. "Erin, your mother has been telling people you're making the wedding difficult." "I'm not involved in the wedding." "I know." That answer stopped me. What exactly is she saying? "Nothing dramatic. That's how Laura does it. She says you're sensitive about your photography, that you don't like people using family images without asking you. that Haley is trying to keep everybody happy, and you're making simple things complicated. Has she told people I refuse to remove photographs? I heard something like that. From who? I'm not giving you a roster of family gossip. I'm not asking for gossip. I'm trying to find out whether people think I refused requests that I never received. Melissa studied me. You really didn't? Melissa, if you asked me to remove something tomorrow, what would I do? You'd probably make me identify the file number. I'd remove it first. She nodded slowly. She knew that. I asked her to forward the thread one more time. This time she did. My phone vibrated almost immediately. I saved the message, exported the conversation as a PDF, and sent the original screenshots to a folder I had created for the complaints. None of that proved Haley had coordinated every request. It proved she had contacted at least one relative before the complaints started, asked for screenshots of my galleries, and offered language that closely matched what later appeared in multiple complaints. It was enough to change my working assumption. It was not enough to call her guilty of everything. That difference became important later. When I drove home, I thought about calling Haley anyway. I imagined the conversation before it happened. I would ask why she sent Melissa wording. Haley would say she was helping relatives communicate privacy concerns. I would ask why she was collecting screenshots. She would say Mom asked her to. I would bring up the mood board. She would say she saved the photograph years ago because she liked the colors. Every answer would be technically possible, and now she would know exactly which evidence I had. So I did not call her. At the time, that felt unnatural. In my family, every problem was supposedly solved by talking. Although what we actually did was talk around things until the person most willing to tolerate discomfort agreed to let them go. I had spent years believing direct questions produced direct answers if you were patient enough. Haley was teaching me otherwise. That afternoon, I called Leah. Leah was our cousin, 32, close enough to Haley to be included in wedding planning conversations, but not close enough to me that she would expect a casual call. Her name was connected to one of the complaint notices I had received. I had already emailed her once and received nothing. She answered with, "Hey, I'm actually running out the door. I'll be quick. Can I call you later?" "You can. But I need to ask whether you submitted a privacy request about one of my galleries." There was a pause. I really don't want to be in the middle of this. You're already in it if something was submitted under your name. I didn't say it wasn't. Then tell me which photograph bothered you. I don't remember the exact one. I closed my eyes. Leah, you asked a platform to restrict a gallery, but you don't remember which image you wanted removed. It wasn't like that. What was it like? I have to go. Did Haley give you the wording? Silence. Then Leah said, much more quietly, I really can't talk about this right now. She ended the call. A minute later, a text arrived. I don't want to be in the middle. I typed my response carefully. You're already in it if you filed something under your name. I'm not asking you to choose between me and anyone else. I'm asking you to tell me what you personally asked to have removed. The message showed as delivered. No reply. I added the exchange to my timeline. By then, I had stopped thinking the silence itself was proof of wrongdoing. Fear, embarrassment, family pressure, and simple cowardice can all look the same from the outside. What mattered was that people who were supposedly upset enough to file complaints could not explain their own complaints when I asked them directly. That evening, Dad called me. He did not say Mom had asked him to. He did not need to. Your mother says you're calling everyone. I called Melissa and Leah. That qualifies as everyone in your mother's version. Did Haley ask you to review old galleries? Outside. Erin. Yes or no? I heard there was some privacy cleanup happening. From who? Your mother. What does privacy cleanup mean? People were uncomfortable. Which people? I don't know. Did Haley ask you to file anything? No. Did she ask Mom? Dad went quiet. Dad? You should ask your mother. It was such a Patrick answer that I almost laughed. My father had always treated not knowing details as a form of innocence. If Mom made a decision he disagreed with mildly, he would avoid asking how it happened. If Haley needed money, he wanted to know the total, not the reason. If conflict started at dinner, He was the man who carried plates into the kitchen and returned when everyone had lowered their voices. "Did you know Haley was contacting relatives about my galleries?" I asked. "I knew she was helping your mother with wedding things. That wasn't my question. Why are you turning this into a conspiracy?" "I'm not. It sounds like you are." 5 complaints arrived using similar language. Haley sent Melissa sample wording before the first one. "Leah submitted something but won't tell me what she objected to. I'm asking questions." Dad was quiet for longer this time. Then he said, "Haley is getting married in a few months. Can you please not blow this up?" That sentence bothered me more than if he had simply told me I was wrong. "I haven't blown anything up." "I know. I'm asking you not to. Why would you ask me that if nothing is happening?" He exhaled. "Dad, talk to your mother." "I did." "Then talk to Haley." "I did that too." "And?" Neither of them gives direct answers. He sounded tired when he said, "Maybe there isn't some bigger answer." I looked at the complaint folder open on my computer. "Maybe." That was all I gave him. A week later, Haley called me sounding wounded. "Did you accuse Melissa of coordinating complaints against you?" "No." "She's upset." I asked whether she had contacted anyone. "That sounds like an accusation." "It wasn't." "You're making everybody nervous." "Everybody again." "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means nobody seems able to tell me who everybody is." Haley gave a frustrated laugh. "This is what I'm talking about. You take something simple and turn it into a deposition." "Did you message Melissa asking for screenshots of my galleries?" There was a pause. Not long enough for someone else to notice. Long enough for me. "Yes." "Why?" "Because Mom asked me to check what was still public." "Why?" "Because people were uncomfortable." "Which people?" "Oh my God. Haley, you sent Melissa wording for a privacy request." I sent her an example because she didn't know what to write. "She didn't send anything." "Fine. Then she didn't use it. Did you send the same wording to anyone else?" I asked people what they were comfortable with. That wasn't my question. It's the answer. No. The answer is yes or no. Her voice sharpened. "You're acting like I committed a crime." "I never said crime." "You're implying it." "I'm asking why you were collecting screenshots of my galleries before anyone contacted me directly." "Because not everybody wants to deal with you when you get like this." "Like what?" "Possessive. About work I created?" "They're family memories, Erin." There it was again. The phrase had begun appearing more often than the privacy concerns themselves. Family memories. Not photographs. Not my photographs. Family memories. It sounded softer that way. Communal. Something no one person could claim. "You told me at lunch you didn't have a complaint about your photographs being online." I said. "I don't." "Then why are you involved?" "Because other people do." "And you're helping them." "Yes. Because apparently somebody has to." Her answer was so calm that for half a second, I wondered whether I had misunderstood the entire situation. That was Haley's strength. She could make interference sound like service. "Did you file anything yourself?" "No." "Do you want any photographs of you removed?" "I already answered that." "Answer again." "No." "I don't care whether my pictures are on your blog." I wrote that sentence down while she was still speaking. She heard the faint scratch of my pen. "Are you taking notes?" "Yes." "That is insane. It keeps me from misquoting you later." "I cannot believe you." "Then don't say anything you wouldn't want quoted accurately." The silence that followed was absolute. For the first time in weeks, I felt the balance of the conversation shift. Not because I had frightened her. I do not think I had. Haley still believed she could explain everything she had done as helping other people. But she had become aware that I was no longer treating each interaction as an isolated family conversation. She was creating a record whether she liked it or not. Haley ended the call first. I saved the note beneath the date. Haley acknowledges contacting relatives regarding comfort with galleries. Denies filing her own complaint. Says she personally does not want her images removed. No adjectives. No accusation. Just facts. The thread Melissa had forwarded contained more than the messages about complaints. And later that night, I went through it again carefully. Most of it was ordinary wedding talk. Haley asking whether Melissa still had a photograph from Grandma's kitchen. Haley asking for a scan of an old Christmas card. Melissa sending a picture of a photo album page. Nothing criminal, nothing even especially strange. Then I found a thumbnail attachment Melissa had sent in response to one of Haley's requests. Below it, Haley had written, "Perfect. I might use this for the keepsake project." I stared at the words. Keepsake project. It was the first time I had seen them. I searched my email to make sure Haley had never mentioned it to me. Nothing. I searched our text history. Nothing. Then I searched publicly. At first, there was almost nothing to find. No active company website. No business announcement. No obvious portfolio. But a social handle using the name Keepsake House existed with no posts. Just a blank profile image and a short line about preserving meaningful family stories. A matching domain led to a simple coming soon page. I did not know who owned the domain. I could not see private registration information, and I was not going to start pretending I had access to things I did not. So I wrote one line in the spreadsheet. Keepsake House? Then I added the date Haley used, the phrase with Melissa. That was all. I did not know whether Keepsake House belonged to Haley. I did not know whether it was connected to the wedding. I did not know whether the photograph on her public mood board had anything to do with it. The word keepsake was common enough that I could have been building a bridge between two completely unrelated things. Still, one fact would not leave me alone. Haley had been asking relatives to send screenshots of my old galleries months before her wedding. She had given at least one person language for requesting those galleries be restricted. And in the same conversation, she had referred to one of the family photographs as material she might use for a keepsake project. I slept badly that night, not because I thought I finally understood what Haley was doing, because I had stopped believing the complaints were the real story. Near midnight the following evening, my phone vibrated against the arm of my couch. I almost ignored it. Then I saw Leah's name. Her message was short enough that I read it 3 times before moving. "I need to tell you something, but I don't want Aunt Laura to know I told you." I sat up, opened the conversation, and typed back. "Then tell me the truth." Leah did not answer my last message until the next morning. She asked if I could meet her somewhere that was not near my parents' neighborhood and not close to where Haley usually went for coffee. That told me more about how nervous she was than anything she had said so far. We chose a bakery in Cary, where neither of us knew anyone, and I got there first because I did not want her walking in and seeing me bent over a laptop like I was preparing an interrogation. I left the computer in my bag. When Leah arrived, she looked over both shoulders before sitting down, then put her phone on the table between us without taking off her coat. "I need you to understand something before I show you anything," she said. "I thought this was about privacy. I did not think Haley was trying to hurt your business." "I believe that you thought that," I said, "but I also need you to understand that you filed something about my work without asking me first." Leah flinched, and I let the silence sit. I did not want to punish her, but I was not going to make her comfortable by pretending her part had not mattered. After a few seconds, she nodded. "I know. I should have asked you." Then she took a breath and added, "Aunt Laura made it sound like everybody had already talked to you, and you were refusing to listen. That did not happen. I know that now." "Who contacted you first?" "Aunt Laura." "Who sent you the wording?" "Haley." "Did you choose the gallery yourself?" Leah shook her head. "Haley sent me the link." Those were the 3 questions I had decided mattered before I arrived, and the answers came cleanly enough that I felt something in my chest tighten. Not because they surprised me. By then, I had already started to suspect coordination. What changed was that suspicion had finally become a sequence. Mom created the pressure. Haley supplied the language. Haley supplied the target. Leah supplied the name attached to the complaint. She unlocked her phone and opened a family group thread that did not include me. The message from Mom was still there. It had been sent weeks before the first complaint reached my host. If anyone has ever felt uncomfortable with Aaron posting family pictures, Haley can help you submit a request. I think it's better to handle this before the wedding so nobody feels awkward later. It was classic Laura. Soft enough that she could later claim she had only invited people to speak up. Strong enough that anybody reading it would assume a problem already existed. Underneath, Haley had replied with a shorter message explaining that the host had a privacy process and that people did not need to contact me directly if they were uncomfortable doing so. Then she posted a sample paragraph almost identical to the language in the notices I had received. Leah scrolled farther. One message stopped me. Haley had written, "If several people send their own requests, Erin will probably just pull the old family galleries herself instead of making it a whole discussion." That was not a confession. It was not a cartoon villain announcing a plan. Haley could still argue that she believed taking the galleries down was the easiest way to solve a legitimate family concern. But the sentence mattered because it showed an expectation. She was not merely helping individuals communicate separate discomfort. She was thinking about the combined effect of multiple complaints on my decision. "Did you think everyone else had already asked me directly?" I said. "Yes." "Why?" "Because Aunt Laura said people had been uncomfortable for years." "Did she name anyone?" Leah frowned. "I don't think so." "Did Holly?" "No. She just said it would be easier if everyone handled their own request." "So you thought everyone else had a problem because Mom said everyone had a problem?" Leah stared down at the screen. "Basically. And you filed because you thought everybody else was filing." Her face turned red. "That sounds stupid when you say it like that." "It sounds human." She looked at me then, surprised. I meant it. Families create strange versions of majority rule. One person says everybody feels something. A second person assumes they are the only one who has not spoken. A third goes along because they do not want to be the difficult one. By the time anyone asks what everybody actually means, 10 people can be participating in a decision none of them individually wanted enough to start. That did not excuse Leah. It did explain why she had sounded ashamed instead of defensive. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have called you." "Yes, I thought you'd be mad." "I am mad." She gave a miserable little laugh. "That actually helps." I asked whether she would send me copies of the messages. She agreed. But before she did, she made me promise I would not post her private conversations publicly without telling her. I told her I had no intention of dumping family texts online. I needed a record of how the complaints had been coordinated, not a humiliation package. She sent screenshots of Mom's message, Haley's sample wording, and the line about several requests making me more likely to pull the galleries myself. I saved them immediately, then asked Leah one more question. "Do you have anything else because you think I should know it, or because you think I should use you to keep watching Haley?" Her eyebrows pulled together. "What do you mean?" "I'm not asking you to spy on her. If you're showing me something you already received because you think it affects me, that's different. I'm not going to turn you into a person feeding me private wedding conversations." Relief moved across her face so quickly, I almost missed it. "Thank you." That reaction told me she had expected exactly the opposite. Maybe Haley had taught everyone that once I became suspicious, I would chase every scrap of information until I had enough to control the room. Maybe Mom had. Maybe I had simply spent enough years being the family member with folders, records, and backups that people assumed evidence mattered more to me than boundaries. Whatever the reason, I wanted my decisions to stay cleaner than theirs. Leah hesitated before putting her phone away. There is something else I already saw. I waited. A project name. The word sharpened my attention. "Keepsake House," she said. I did not react immediately. "What is it?" "I'm not totally sure. Haley started mentioning it in bridal planning stuff. At first I thought it was part of the wedding, like a memory book or guest book company. Then there was a vendor conversation about production samples." "What kind of samples?" "Books, I think. Maybe family albums." She sent a screenshot of an invoice once, because she was asking if the paper upgrade was worth it. "Do you still have it?" Leah checked. The screenshot, yes. I don't have the invoice itself. She turned her phone toward me. It was a cropped image from a bridal planning chat, showing part of a quote from a small print production vendor. Most of the details were cut off, but the header included the words, "Keepsake House Sample Production." I did not take the phone from her. I simply wrote down the exact phrase and asked if she was comfortable forwarding the screenshot she had already received. She did. When we left the bakery, I knew two things I had not known before. The complaints had not emerged independently, and Keepsake House was more than a casual phrase Haley had used with Melissa. It existed as something organized enough to request production samples. That still did not tell me what it was, who legally owned it, whether Aaron was involved, or whether any of my photographs were being used beyond the wedding mood board I had seen publicly. So I did what I had been doing from the beginning. I separated what I knew from what I suspected. At home, I searched the name again. The Coming Soon page I had found before was still there. This time I looked more carefully at the wording. Preserving the stories families live before they realize their history. I read it several times. It was not plagiarism. The sentence was not mine. But the idea sounded uncomfortably familiar, because Ordinary Light had always been built around the opposite of posed perfection. I photographed the things families rarely thought to preserve until they were gone. Hands passing plates. Shoes piled beside a door. A father asleep on a couch. A child hiding under a table during a birthday party. My old About page had once described the work as keeping ordinary moments before people understood they would miss them. Similar philosophy did not prove anything. Plenty of photographers, scrapbook companies, archivists, and memory services used the same emotional territory. I took a time-stamped screenshot of the page and closed it. 2 days later, I was at a print lab picking up a set of large-format proofs for a client when a photographer named Owen Grant called my name from the counter behind me. I knew Owen casually from local industry events. He shot weddings and family portraits, and we had shared referrals when one of us was booked. "Hey," he said, "you doing something with Keepsake House?" The question hit so directly that I nearly answered too fast. "No." He looked confused. "Really? Why?" "I saw something in a production group about a woman looking for a memory book partner. Your sister, I think. Haley Walker?" My fingers tightened around the cardboard print sleeve I was holding. What did she say? Nothing weird. She was asking about short-run archival books and custom family story packages. Somebody asked if she had examples, and she said they were building from their family archive while the service was in development. Our family archive. Yeah. Owen must have seen something change in my expression because he immediately added, "I assumed you were involved. Your work came to mind." Did she use my name? No. That's why I assumed. You've been photographing your family forever. Did you see photographs? Not in the post I saw. Just the production question. I nodded. If you come across anything public, send me the link. Don't go looking for me. He gave me a long look. Everything okay? I don't know yet. That was the most accurate answer I had. Driving home, I kept returning to one phrase. Our family archive. It was smarter than claiming she had taken the pictures. Haley knew enough not to do that. If she said she was the photographer, I could disprove it with originals, publication history, years of professional records, and probably half a dozen people who had watched me make the images. But family archive was different. It shifted attention away from authorship. It made the photographs sound like old boxes pulled from an attic, collectively owned pieces of family history rather than creative work made by one identifiable person. It also fit the language Haley had been using with me for weeks. They're just family pictures. They're family memories. You've already used them. I had heard those sentences as dismissal. Now I wondered whether they were preparation. The following afternoon, Aaron called. That did not happen often enough for me to mistake it for casual conversation. He and I got along fine, but our relationship existed mostly through Haley. He was polite, steady, and more private than she was. I knew he worked in commercial project management, that he preferred beer to wine, and that he was the kind of person who returned borrowed tools cleaner than when he received them. We had never had a reason to talk independently for more than a few minutes. "Hey, Aaron," he said. "Sorry to bother you. I'm working on the memorial table for the reception. Haley said you might have an old picture of her grandparents from their anniversary. I probably do. Could you send it? To you directly, yes." There was a pause. "Is there a reason not to send it to Haley?" "Yes." He waited for more. I gave him exactly what he needed. "I'm not sending any of my archive files through Haley right now. If the photograph is for the wedding, I'm happy to give you a copy for that use." "Okay." He sounded cautious rather than offended. Then he said, I know you two have had issues about her project. My attention snapped into place. What project? Silence. Aaron cleared his throat. Keepsake House. What is Keepsake House, Aaron? Another pause, longer this time. You don't know? I'm asking you. I thought you did. Why? Haley said you had concerns about it. What concerns? He sounded increasingly uncomfortable. She said you thought it was too close to your work. I stood up from my desk without realizing I had done it. Aaron, I learned the name Keepsake House less than a week ago. He did not answer. What exactly did Haley tell you? I don't want to get between you two. You're not between us. You just told me she said I had concerns about a project I did not know existed. He exhaled. She said there had been tension because you thought she was using family material in a way that stepped on your brand. She said you basically threatened to make trouble if she launched. My body went very still. When did she tell you that? I don't know. A couple months ago? Before October? I think so. That mattered. My first complaint had arrived in October. I had not seen Keepsake House mentioned anywhere until much later. Yet, Haley had apparently told Aaron months earlier that I had already objected to it and threatened to sabotage it. You understand why that's a problem, I said. I understand that the timing doesn't make sense. Did you invest in it? No. We talked about me helping with some launch costs after the wedding. Nothing's been transferred. That answer mattered too, though I did not yet know how much it would matter later. Is it a photography company? No. At least that's not how she described it. Memory books, family history projects, wedding legacy packages, that sort of thing. Using what photographs? She said they'd start with family material and build original client examples later. Whose family material? Aaron was silent again. I think you know why I'm asking. Aaron, I honestly assumed you were part of it at some point. I'm not. I believe you. Don't believe me because I sound convincing. Just remember this conversation. He was quiet for a moment. Okay. I sent him the grandparents' photograph directly with a short note stating it was for the memorial table at Haley and Aaron's wedding only. It felt absurdly formal for an old anniversary picture, but I was done relying on implication. After the call, I stared at my evidence folder for nearly an hour. I had enough to feel betrayed, not enough to accuse a business partner of misconduct. That distinction was getting harder to maintain. I knew the complaints had been coordinated. I knew Haley was connected to Keepsake House. I knew she had described me to Aaron as a threat before I even knew the project existed. I knew she was referring to our family archive in professional conversations. I knew at least one image from a restricted ordinary light gallery had appeared in her public wedding mood board. What I did not have was a pitch deck, a contract, a commercial webpage showing my images, a file proving Keepsake House was actually using my photographs rather than merely discussing family archives in general. I could have started emailing vendors and warning them anyway. I did not. If I contacted people based on inference, Haley would have exactly the story she had apparently been telling Aaron for months. Jealous older sister tries to sabotage younger sister's project before launch. I was not going to provide the evidence for her version of me. Instead, I wrote Haley an email. I kept it short. Haley, I am aware you are developing a project called Keepsake House. I am not granting permission for my photographs to be used commercially. In business development, portfolios, sample products, marketing, or client materials. Do not represent that you have my authorization to use my work. If you believe you are currently using no photographs created by me, then this boundary should require no action from you. I read it twice before sending. Haley replied 17 minutes later. I'm not using your work. Nothing else. No confusion. No question about how I knew the project name. No explanation. Just denial. I saved the email. Then I did something that felt almost embarrassingly restrained. I went back to editing my client work. That was one of the hardest parts of those months. Drama makes you feel like every problem demands immediate motion. Call somebody. Confront somebody. Expose something. But most good decisions I made happened when I refused to move before I knew where I was standing. 3 nights later, Leah texted me again. I almost told her not to send anything else. I had meant what I said about not using her as a spy. Then I read the message. Haley sent this to the whole bridal group last month. I already had it. I think you need to see page 6. Attached was a PDF preview. I called Leah before opening it. Did you get this because you went looking for it? No. Did Haley send it to you directly as part of the bridal group? Yes. Everyone in the group got the same file. It was supposed to be an early preview of some wedding keepsake ideas. Are you okay with me saving the copy you received? Yes. You don't need to send me anything else after this. I know. Only then did I open it. The first pages were harmless enough. Wedding colors, guest book concepts, a few layout ideas for family stories and memory pages. Then I reached page 6. My photograph filled almost half the spread. It was the summer cookout image of Haley under the string lights, the one from a gallery that had been restricted after a privacy complaint. The layout used a wider crop than the version that had appeared publicly on Ordinary Light. The left side included a sliver of a weathered wooden post and part of a folding chair that I had trimmed out before publishing the blog version. I opened my archived web export beside it. The public image ended before the post. The PDF did not. My pulse changed, not because the photograph looked better or worse, because that extra strip of image told me something concrete. Whoever built that layout had not simply saved the public crop from Ordinary Light. They had access to another version. I zoomed out and read the caption beneath it. From the Walker Family Archive. Not photograph by Aaron Walker. Not courtesy of Aaron Walker. Not even image supplied by the photographer. Family Archive. I sat there for a long time with both versions open side by side. Haley had told me in writing that she was not using my work. Yet one of my photographs was sitting inside a keepsake house-related preview that she had distributed herself, labeled in a way that removed me from the source. And the file used was not the version anyone could have casually downloaded from my public blog. That was the point when the mystery changed completely. I no longer needed to ask whether Haley was using my photographs. I needed to ask how she had gotten access to versions I had never put online. There were not many possible answers. The originals existed in my current backups. They existed in older exports. And one old copy of the family archive was still sitting on a scratched gray drive in the closet at my parents' house. Or at least, the last time I had looked, it had been there. I drove to my parents' house the next morning without calling first. That was not how I usually handled things with them. But I did not want Mom or Dad to know what I was looking for before I knew whether there was anything to find. The gray drive had been sitting in the spare room closet for years. Dad had held it in his hand less than 2 months earlier and asked whether I still wanted it. I had told him to leave it there. If it was gone now, I wanted to see that before anybody had time to tell me a story about why. Dad's truck was in the driveway when I arrived. Mom's car was not. He opened the front door wearing an old sweatshirt and looked surprised to see me. Everything okay? I need to get something from the spare room. He stepped aside. You could have called. I was nearby. That was a lie, but not an important one. I walked upstairs before he could ask what I meant. The closet looked almost exactly the way it had the last time I was there. Photo boxes on the top shelf, tangled cords in a plastic bin, 2 old laptop bags, a stack of framed pictures Mom had rotated out of the hallway years ago. I crouched and moved a box of Christmas decorations aside. The gray drive was gone. I checked anyway. Shelf by shelf. I pulled out every hard drive Dad had left there and read the labels. One was his tax backup. Another belonged to an old desktop computer. A third contained video transfers from home movies. I opened the plastic cable bin, even though there was no reason the drive would be underneath a nest of extension cords. Then I stood and checked the shelf again because people do stupid things when they do not like the answer in front of them. Dad appeared in the doorway. What are you looking for? The gray external drive. He frowned. The one from before? Yes. Thought you were taking it. I told you to leave it here. He looked toward the shelves. Maybe I moved it. Where? I don't know. Garage maybe. I watched his face. Dad was not a good liar when he was inventing something in real time. His eyes moved away from mine, and he usually filled silence too quickly. This time, he looked genuinely uncertain. Did Mom take it? I don't know. Did Tale? I don't know. Did you give it to either of them? No. That answer came fast enough that I believed him. When was the last time you saw it? Dad rubbed one hand along his jaw. When you were here, I guess. You haven't touched it since? I've been in this closet since then, Aaron. I don't remember every hard drive I moved. I'm not asking about every hard drive. He heard the edge in my voice. What's going on? I took out my phone and opened the keepsake house preview Leah had forwarded. I zoomed in on the cookout photograph and held it toward him. Do you recognize this? Dad looked at the picture. Haley, do you recognize where it came from? He shrugged. One of your pictures. Yes, but this version was never public. His forehead creased. What does that mean? It means whoever made this had access to a different copy than the one on my blog. Couldn't Haley have had it already? Maybe. Dad relaxed slightly, as if he preferred that answer. So why are you assuming someone took the drive? I'm not assuming. I'm checking. There was my own voice again. Calm. Precise. The voice Mom said made everything feel like an investigation. I had stopped apologizing for it. Dad looked back at the empty shelf. Maybe your mother moved it when she was putting together wedding stuff. What wedding stuff requires my archive? I don't know. Then ask her. He gave me a tired look. You can ask her yourself. I will. I took pictures of the shelf, not because an empty shelf proved theft, but because I had learned that if I did not document what I saw, 3 weeks later somebody might tell me I had remembered it wrong. Then I checked the old photo books nearby. 2 were missing from the stack I remembered, but I could not be certain they had been there last time. So I did not add them to anything except a private note. When I came downstairs, Dad followed me into the kitchen. Aaron, before you go calling your mother and Haley, can you tell me what you think is happening? I think Haley is developing a business called Keepsake House. I know that. I stopped. Dad realized what he had said. You know that. She's mentioned it. When? I don't know. A while ago. What did she tell you? That it was some kind of family history thing? Did she tell you she was using my photographs? She said she was using family pictures for samples. I stared at him. Dad. What? You just changed the noun again. He frowned. Not family pictures. My photographs. He exhaled. Aaron, I'm not arguing copyright with you before breakfast. This isn't a legal argument. Did she tell you she was using pictures I took? I assumed some of them were yours. Did you ask whether I had agreed? No. Why not? His shoulders dropped. Because I assumed you two had talked. Why? Because she said there had been some issue between you about the project. The same story she had told Aaron. My stomach tightened, but I kept my voice even. She told you I already knew. Yes. She told Aaron that too. Dad looked uncomfortable. I did not know Keepsake House existed until a few weeks ago. He looked down at the counter. That's not a small misunderstanding. I didn't say it was. You didn't ask me because Haley told you I already knew, and you believed her. I had no reason not to. You had my phone number. He did not answer. That was the first time in the entire situation I felt something close to anger break through the discipline I had been holding on to. Not because Dad had secretly planned anything. I still did not think he had. It was the ease of it. Haley gave him a story that allowed him not to ask a difficult question, so he accepted it. Did you know people were filing complaints about my galleries? I knew there were complaints. Did you know Haley was helping coordinate them? I knew she was helping people submit requests. Did you know the photographs being reported overlapped with the material she wanted for Keepsake House? No. Did you ever ask? His mouth tightened. That's the problem, Dad. He looked at me. What do you want me to say? I want you to stop acting like not asking questions makes you neutral. He flinched. I had never spoken to him that way before. I was not proud of hurting him. But I was not sorry I said it. Dad stared toward the window for a long moment. I'll ask your mother about the drive. No. I'll ask her. I left before he could turn it into another conversation about keeping peace. Mom called before I reached home. Dad had apparently decided that asking her himself was less unpleasant than waiting for me to do it. "What are you doing going through closets?" she asked. I almost laughed. "My closet now? You know what I mean. I went to get my hard drive. You said you didn't need it. I said I'd take it after the wedding. Well, I may have moved it. Where? I don't remember." That answer is getting popular. Don't talk to me like that. Did you give the drive to Haley? Silence. Not the startled kind, the calculating kind. Mom. She needed old pictures for the wedding. There it was. My fingers tightened around the phone. You gave her my drive. I let her borrow it. Without asking me. They're family photographs. I closed my eyes. No, the drive is mine. Oh, come on. It contains my work. It contains pictures of all of us. That does not make the storage device yours. You left it here for years. That does not make it abandoned. She needed some childhood pictures. I knew you would make everything complicated. I laughed once without humor. So instead of asking me, you took the drive. I did not take anything. It was in my house. That sentence clarified more than she intended. This was not a misunderstanding about technology. Mom genuinely believed physical access created entitlement. The drive sat under her roof. The photographs showed people related to her. Therefore, whatever lines separated my work from family property could be ignored if it became inconvenient. When did you give it to Haley? A couple months ago. Before the complaints started? I don't keep a calendar of every conversation. Did you know she was developing Keepsake House? Mom went quiet. Did you know? Yes. Did you know she was using my photographs? She was using family photographs as examples. Did you know she told Aaron and Dad that I already knew about the project? I don't know what she told Aaron. That wasn't the question. Mom's irritation sharpened. Why are you trying to trap me? I'm trying to establish what happened. There you go again. What exactly did you think Haley was going to do with the drive? She was making wedding materials, memory books, things for her project. I didn't ask for an inventory. Did you know some of the same galleries were being reported to my host? I knew people had privacy concerns, and you saw no problem with helping Haley use those same photographs somewhere else? They didn't want them on a public photography blog? Then why would they want them used in a business sample? Mom did not answer. That was the first time I heard the contradiction land on her instead of me. I waited. She finally said, "You're twisting this." No, I'm putting two things next to each other. Haley was trying to build something of her own. There it was. The justification underneath everything else. And that gives her my work? You have thousands of pictures. The anger I had felt with Dad cooled instantly into something harder. You think quantity changes ownership? I think you could afford to be generous. I have been generous. This is family. That's why I was generous. Mom exhaled. Haley needs a chance, Aaron. You already have a career. I leaned against my kitchen counter and looked out the window. For years, that sentence had worn different clothes. Aaron is independent. Aaron can handle it. Aaron doesn't need help. Haley is still figuring things out. Haley needs support. Competence had become the family tax I paid for being competent. I'm going to say this once, I told her. I am not responsible for supplying the foundation of Haley's business because I already built one for myself. You always make everything sound transactional. No, you made my work transactional the moment you decided Haley needed it more than I did. She is your sister, and I am your daughter. Mom went silent. I continued before she could redirect. I want the gray drive returned to me. I want every copy Haley made from it identified. And I already told her in writing that she does not have permission to use my photographs for Keepsake House. She told me about that email. She was devastated. She replied, I'm not using your work. Maybe she isn't. I've already seen it. Silence again. I did not tell Mom which photograph or where. I wanted to know whether she would volunteer anything. She did not. I have to go, she said. Tell Haley to return the drive. She's busy planning a wedding. She can find 10 minutes. Mom ended the call. I stood in my kitchen for several minutes afterward and let myself be angry. Not performatively, not productively. I did not immediately open the evidence folder or draft another email. I just stood there and admitted that I was furious. Then I made lunch. That sounds unimportant, but it mattered. I had spent several weeks allowing this problem to invade the edges of my workday. Every message became urgent. Every silence became something to analyze. I was not going to let Haley's project consume my entire life, simply because she had made mine useful to hers. After lunch, I updated the timeline. Laura confirms she gave Gray Drive to Haley approximately 2 months earlier. Laura knew Keepsake House existed. Laura understood Haley would use family photographs in project-related materials. Laura claims purpose also included wedding materials. Laura says Haley needed a chance, because Aaron already had a career. I stopped there. I did not write that Mom knowingly helped steal my work. Not yet. Intent mattered, and I did not know enough. That evening, Haley emailed me. Mom says you're accusing her of stealing a hard drive. I responded with 4 sentences. The Gray Drive belongs to me. Mom confirmed she gave it to you without my permission. Please return it and confirm whether you copied files from it. My previous boundary regarding commercial use of my photographs remains unchanged. Her reply arrived almost immediately. You left that drive at Mom and Dad's house for years. I used family photos for wedding planning. Stop trying to make this ugly. I wrote back. Did you copy files from the drive? She did not answer. The next morning, I sent the question again. No answer. I did not send a third time. Instead, I changed passwords on every current cloud archive, disabled any old shared links I could identify, reviewed logged-in devices, and made sure none of my professional storage accounts used credentials Haley or my parents could guess. There was no evidence they had accessed anything beyond the physical drive. But once I knew one boundary had been ignored, I had no reason to leave the rest dependent on trust. I also made a complete local inventory of the drive's older contents based on my backup copy. That took most of the afternoon. The archive was larger than I remembered. Family birthdays, graduations, Christmas mornings, road trips, beach weekends, ordinary Sundays. Some images had appeared on Ordinary Light over the years. Many had not. Some had never been exported beyond personal backup folders because I had not considered them strong enough for publication. Those were the files that worried me most. If Haley's project contained only images from my public galleries, she could still pretend she had saved them years earlier. If it contained a photograph that had never been online, the Gray Drive became the simplest explanation. I created a list of unpublished images featuring Haley that would be visually attractive enough to interest her. I hated myself a little for thinking that way. Not because the reasoning was wrong, because it meant looking at pictures I had taken out of affection and evaluating how useful they might be to someone trying to erase me from their origin. One photograph stopped me. Haley was 19 in it, standing in Mom's kitchen on the morning of her community college graduation. She was not wearing her gown yet. Her hair was half pinned up, and Mom was reaching behind her to fasten a small necklace at the back of her neck. Haley was looking toward the window, nervous and trying not to show it. The light fell across both of them in a way I had loved the moment I pressed the shutter. I had never posted that photograph. Haley had hated the expression on her face when I first showed her the contact sheet. Delete that one, she had said. I did not delete photographs simply because someone disliked themselves for a moment, but I never published it. It stayed in the private family archive. I added the file name to the unpublished list. 2 days later, Leah called me. I'm not sending you bridal group stuff, she said immediately. I didn't ask. I know. This is different. What happened? Haley asked me if I still had the Keepsake House preview she sent. Why? She said there's an updated version and the old one shouldn't be shared. I sat down. Did she send the updated one? No, she just told everybody to delete the earlier PDF because some layouts were changing. Did she say why? No. I thought about the email I had sent Haley days earlier. I had explicitly told her not to use my photographs. The preview Leah already had contained one of them. If Haley was now recalling that version, she might simply be correcting the layout or cleaning the record. Do not ask her for the new version, I said. I wasn't going to. Don't tell her you sent me the old one. Leah hesitated. She probably knows somebody did. Let her wonder. That afternoon, I noticed something else. The public Keepsake House Coming Soon page had changed. The line about preserving family stories remained, but a new email sign-up appeared, along with a faint background image under the text. It was heavily blurred and darkened, more atmosphere than photograph. I might have ignored it if I had not spent the previous day cataloging my archive. The shapes looked familiar. A kitchen window, 2 figures, one turned slightly sideways. I enlarged the screenshot, knowing it would not create detail that was not there. I compared the composition to several images in my archive. The background could have been one of mine. Could have was not enough. I saved the page and moved on. Then Mom texted me, "Please stop looking for problems before the wedding. Haley has enough going on." I did not respond. A few hours later, Dad called. He sounded uncomfortable before he said hello. "Haley dropped off your drive." "Where?" "Here." "Did she say whether she copied it?" "No." "Did you ask?" This time he did not dodge. "Yes." "And?" "She said she only took what she needed for wedding stuff." "What does that mean?" I asked her the same thing. I was quiet. That was new. "What did she say?" "That she made a folder of family pictures." "How many?" "She wouldn't say." "Did she tell you whether she used them for Keepsake House?" Dad sighed. "She said the wedding and Keepsake House overlap because the wedding is part of the family story concept." I almost admired the sentence. Haley had created a category broad enough to swallow anything. "Do not plug the drive into anything," I said. "Why?" "Because I want it exactly as she returned it." Dad went silent. "I'm not accusing her of putting anything on it. I just don't want files changed accidentally." "Okay. I'll get it tomorrow." He paused before ending the call. "Aaron?" "Yes?" I should have asked more questions. I closed my eyes. It was not an apology. Not really. But it was the first crack in his insistence that ignorance had happened to him instead of being something he chose. "I know," I said. When I picked up the drive the next morning, Dad handed it to me in a small grocery bag like it was evidence in a crime show. I almost told him to relax. But then I remembered he had spent weeks telling me I was making things too serious. Maybe a little discomfort was useful. At home, I compared the drive's folders against my backup inventory. Nothing obvious had been deleted. No new folder labeled Keepsake House. No confession sitting neatly on the desktop. I had not expected one. The file access history on a portable drive was not a magical diary that could tell me exactly what Haley copied. And I was not going to pretend otherwise. What I could establish was what had been available to her. Thousands of files, hundreds never posted publicly, dozens of strong images featuring Haley and my parents, the graduation kitchen photograph among them. I disconnected the drive and locked it in my office cabinet. Then I wrote Haley one final message about it. "The drive has been returned. You still have not answered whether you copied files from it. I am documenting that you had access to unpublished photographs while developing Keepsake House. My boundary remains the same." This time she answered, "You are obsessed. I used family memories. That's it. Not I did not copy them. Not I did not use unpublished files. Family memories." Again, I saved the message. December arrived, and for almost 2 weeks nothing new happened. No additional complaints. No public Keepsake House launch. Haley stopped contacting me except for a generic family group text about wedding invitations. Mom went quiet too. I began to wonder whether my boundary had worked. Maybe Haley had removed my images and rebuilt her materials. Maybe the entire conflict would end with a bitter family argument, a delayed business launch, and a wedding where Haley and I avoided each other. I could live with that. Then Leah forwarded me one message with no attachment. "I already had this conversation before you told me not to send you anything else. I think you need to know what she asked." Below it was an older exchange between Leah and Haley, from before I had discovered the drive was missing. Haley had asked Leah which photographs she thought would work best in a section called Our Story Through the Years. Leah had replied that she liked the kitchen graduation picture because Mom and Haley looked close. My breathing stopped for a second. Haley responded, "I love that one too. Mom found it in the old archive. Aaron never posted it, so it feels more personal." I read the sentence again. Then again. There was no room left for coincidence. Haley knew the photograph had never been posted. She knew Mom had found it in the old archive. And she was already planning to use it in something called Our Story Through the Years. I opened the private backup and pulled up the image. Haley at 19. Mom fastening the necklace. The window light. A moment I had preserved because I loved them both. Months later, that same photograph would appear on a giant screen at my sister's wedding. By then, nobody in the room would know I had ever been standing on the other side of the camera. 3 days before the wedding, Mom called and asked me to take the high road. She did not start with the gray drive, the complaints, or the fact that Haley had used an unpublished photograph after telling me in writing that she was not using my work. She started with flowers. The florist had changed the delivery schedule. One of Aaron's relatives had added a guest after the seating chart was supposedly final, and Mom had discovered that the hotel had booked another wedding in a ballroom across the hall. She talked for nearly 5 minutes before finally saying, "I need you to promise me you're going to let all of this go until after Haley's honeymoon." I was sitting at my desk with the boundary email to Haley open on one monitor and a client gallery on the other. Define, let it go. You know exactly what I mean. No, I don't. Do you mean I won't discuss it at the wedding? I wasn't planning to. Do you mean I won't contact Haley's vendors during the wedding weekend? I haven't contacted them at all. Do you mean I reopen the galleries and pretend none of this happened? No. Mom made the sound she always made when she thought precision was a form of aggression. Can you just come and be her sister? That's what I plan to do. Then stop documenting everything like you're building a case. I'm documenting what happened, because every time I ask a direct question, the answer changes. You are going to ruin this relationship if you keep going. I looked at the folder on my screen. The complaints. Haley's sample wording. Mom's group message. The keepsake house preview. My boundary email. The gray drive. The unpublished graduation photograph Haley had already admitted came from an old archive. Which relationship are you asking me to protect, Mom? The one where I'm expected not to notice what people are doing. That is not fair. Neither was giving my archive to Haley without asking me. We have already talked about that. No. You told me why you thought you were entitled to do it. That isn't the same thing. She went quiet for several seconds. Then her voice softened in a way that would once have worked on me. Please. Just for one weekend. Haley only gets one wedding. I had no intention of walking into my sister's reception with a stack of printouts and a plan to expose her. I had never intended that. But I also heard the assumption beneath Mom's request. Haley's wedding was a protected event. My work, my boundaries, and whatever had been done to me could be suspended if acknowledging them made the bride uncomfortable. I will not start anything at her wedding, I said. If nothing new happens, nothing new happens. Mom caught the condition immediately. What does that mean? It means I'm not promising to ignore something if somebody uses my work in front of me and then lies about it. Oh my God, Aaron. That's as much as I'm promising. She ended the call without saying goodbye. For the first time since the complaints began, I seriously considered not going. I did not consider it because I was afraid Haley would say something cruel, or because I thought I would lose control. I considered it because I was tired. Every conversation with my family had become a strange test in which I was expected to prove I was reasonable by tolerating one more unreasonable thing. If I stayed home, I could spend the weekend editing, order takeout, turn off my phone, and refuse to participate in whatever version of family unity Mom intended to stage. The problem was that staying home would also become part of the story. Haley had already told Aaron I resented Keepsake House before I knew it existed. Mom had already told relatives I was making wedding planning difficult even though I had barely participated. If I did not attend, I could hear the explanation forming without anyone needing to say it to me. Erin couldn't put her feelings aside. Erin chose to stay away. Erin has always been distant. That afternoon I met my friend Diane Foster after work. Diane was 40, another photographer, and one of the few people I trusted enough to discuss the situation without needing her to tell me I was right. I gave her the abbreviated version because she already knew about the complaints and the drive. So don't go, she said. I looked at her over my coffee. That was quick. You sound like you want permission. I don't need permission. Then why are you explaining it to me? I hated when she did that. Diane stirred sugar into her drink. Do you want to be at your sister's wedding? I thought about it. Not whether Haley deserved my attendance. Not whether Mom expected it. Not whether the family would judge me if I stayed away. Whether I wanted to be there. Yes, I said eventually. I do. Then go. That simple? No. But the decision can be. I leaned back. I don't want them using my attendance as proof everything's fine. Then don't act like everything's fine. I also don't want to spend the whole day watching for evidence. Then don't. I gave her a look. Diane shrugged. You're the one who taught me you can choose what's in your frame. That irritated me because it was annoyingly appropriate. I hate metaphors about photography when photographers use them on each other. I know. We sat there for another hour, but Diane never told me what to do. That was why I trusted her. By the time I left, I had made my decision. I was going because I wanted to see my sister get married. I was going because I refused to let Haley's behavior decide whether I was allowed to occupy my own family's important moments. And I was going because if anybody later claimed I had chosen distance, they would be lying about something I had personally refused to give them. I changed my hotel reservation that evening. Originally, Mom had blocked rooms for relatives near the venue and assumed I would stay with everyone else. I booked my own room at a different hotel 15 minutes away. I would drive myself. I would leave when I wanted. I would not depend on a family shuttle, a shared ride, or anyone deciding when I was allowed to go home. It was not dramatic. It was logistics. Independence becomes much easier to maintain when you do not need the people frustrating you to hand you your car keys. The next day, Aaron contacted me about the photograph for the memorial table. His grandparents' anniversary picture had been printed incorrectly by the wedding coordinator because the file someone sent was too small, and he asked whether I could provide a better version. I sent him a fresh download link with a short note stating that the file was for the memorial display at his and Haley's wedding. I had started doing that with every image connected to the event. Not because I expected Aaron to misuse anything, but because ambiguity had become expensive. He thanked me, then called, instead of continuing by text. Can I ask you something uncomfortable? You can ask. Haley said you threatened to interfere with Keepsake House months ago. I stared at the wall. We already touched on this once. I know. I went back and looked at when she first mentioned it to me. My attention sharpened. When was that? Late August. Before the first complaint. Before I knew the name Keepsake House. Before I had any reason to object to a business I did not know existed. What exactly did she say? That you thought she was building something too close to your brand, and you told her you'd make sure people knew where her ideas came from. I took a breath. Aaron, the first time I saw the words Keepsake House was in November. He was silent. I can prove when I first contacted Haley about it because I emailed her after I learned the name. That email is dated weeks after the story she told you supposedly happened. Can you send me that? I considered the request. Yes, the boundary email, not my whole evidence folder. I'm not asking for your whole folder. I know. I forwarded him the email while we were still on the phone. The timestamp showed exactly when I had told Haley I was aware of Keepsake House and exactly what I had said. I did not grant permission for my photographs to be used commercially. No threat. No promise to sabotage her. No accusation that the business copied my brand. Aaron was quiet for almost half a minute after opening it. That's not what I was told. I know. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because it's your marriage, and I wasn't going to start sending you evidence every time Haley said something about me. He exhaled slowly. I don't know what to do with this right now. You don't have to do anything for me. You're going to the wedding? Yes. Okay. He sounded relieved, which told me Haley had probably suggested I might not. Before we hung up, he said, For whatever it's worth, I appreciate you sending the memorial photo. It's your wedding too, Aaron. That was the last normal conversation we had before the reception. Later that evening, Dad accidentally showed me more than he intended. Our family had a group text for wedding logistics that included Mom, Dad, Haley, Aaron, Leah, me, and several other relatives helping with specific things. I had muted it because most messages involved arrival times and whether somebody had picked up garment bags. A notification appeared while I was editing. Dad had written, Your mom says Aaron won't make a scene at the wedding. Just don't provoke her before then. The message sat there long enough for me to read it twice. Then it disappeared. A second message came immediately. Sorry. Wrong thread. Nobody replied. I took a screenshot of the notification history and saved it. I did not text Dad privately. I did not ask who the message was meant for. The wording itself told me enough. It could have been intended for Haley. It could have been intended for Mom. What mattered was not the recipient. It was the assumption. They were managing me. Not because I had threatened anyone. Because they knew something was unresolved and were relying on my self-control to keep it invisible until the event was over. Dad called 10 minutes later. I sent something to the wrong group. I noticed. It sounded worse than I meant it. What did you mean? He was quiet. Exactly what part am I misreading? I was telling Haley not to bring up the photo situation with you before the wedding. Why would she bring it up? I don't know. Then why warn her? Because your mother is stressed. I laughed softly. There it is. What? Every answer eventually becomes Mom is stressed. That's not fair. Was the message supposed to go to Haley? Another pause. Yes. Did Haley tell you she planned to provoke me? No. Then why did you think she needed warning? Dad sighed. Because everyone's on edge. No, Dad. I'm not on edge. I'm documenting what happened and going to a wedding. You know what I mean. I do. That's the problem. He apologized for sending the message to the wrong thread. He did not apologize for the message. I let him off the phone anyway. The night before I drove to the venue, I prepared for the weekend in the least dramatic way possible. I synced my evidence folder to secure cloud storage. I exported one clean timeline containing dates only. First complaint, Haley's messages, Mom's group text, discovery of keepsake house, my boundary email, confirmation of the drive, and the unpublished graduation image. I printed a single copy and left it in my hotel bag. I did not prepare a speech. I did not pack screenshots into a folder to carry into the reception. I did not contact Miles, the wedding photographer, or anybody associated with the venue. My rules were simple. If the wedding used photographs I had previously allowed the family to use for personal purposes, I would note it and deal with it later. If I saw private archive material, I would document what I could from where I was sitting. If Keepsake House appeared as an actual commercial pitch, I would preserve evidence and address it after the wedding. I would not interrupt vows, toasts, dinner, or dancing over a business dispute. That was the plan. The welcome event was held at the venue the evening before the ceremony. Nothing about it looked like the beginning of a family collapse. People drank wine on a covered terrace. Aaron's relatives introduced themselves. Someone's toddler spent 20 minutes trying to steal olives from a catering tray. Haley moved through the room in a cream dress, hugging people, laughing, touching shoulders, remembering names. She was excellent at being a bride. When she saw me, she crossed the terrace and hugged me in full view of everyone. You came. Of course I came. For half a second, something crossed her face that I could not identify. Relief. Maybe. Or surprise. I wasn't sure. Why? She smiled. You've been so upset. I'm not upset about you getting married. That's good. Is it? Her smile tightened. Then somebody called her name, and she turned away. Mom found me near the bar less than 10 minutes later. She hooked one arm through mine and led me toward an older couple I had never met. This is our daughter Erin, she said brightly. She's the photographer in the family. The woman smiled. Oh, wonderful. Are you doing the wedding? No, I said. I'm a guest. Mom laughed. Erin's far too serious about photography to photograph her own sister's wedding. I looked at her. Before I could answer, she continued. Haley's the one doing something really special with all our old family memories. She has such a gift for turning them into something beautiful. The older woman turned toward Haley across the terrace. Is that her business? It will be, Mom said proudly. I felt the pieces align again. Not proof. Positioning. Mom had already started introducing Haley's project as a natural extension of family history, while describing my role as merely the photographer who happened to exist somewhere beside it. I said nothing. An hour later, I saw the wedding planner cross the room carrying a tablet. A freelance editor I recognized from the venue's vendor team followed her. They went directly to Haley, who stepped away from a group of bridesmaids. Mom joined them almost immediately. I was too far away to see the screen clearly, and I did not move closer. The editor said something. Haley began scrolling. Mom pointed at the tablet once. Haley shook her head, scrolled again, then stopped. Yes, keep this version. The editor asked a question I could not hear. Haley nodded. The final one. I looked away before anyone noticed I was watching. That mattered because later, when people tried to separate Haley from what appeared in the slideshow, I remembered exactly what I had seen. She had not been handed some surprise video at the reception. She had personally reviewed a final version the night before and approved it. I still did not know what was inside it. Aaron approached me shortly afterward. You okay? Fine. He glanced toward Haley and the tablet. Did you see that? I saw her approve something. The slideshow. I turned toward him. He rubbed the back of his neck. She's been working on it with your mom. How long? I don't know. A few weeks. Have you seen it? Parts. Anything from Keepsake House? His expression shifted. I don't know where one ends and the other starts anymore. That answer stayed with me. Before we could continue, Haley called for him and he went. I left the welcome event before 11. Not because anything had happened. Because I had learned enough. At the hotel, I took off my earrings, changed clothes, and opened my phone. Leah had sent one message. Haley told the bridal group the sample booklet is still the version she's using for now. She also said, the real launch starts after the honeymoon. I already had the screenshot because she sent it to all of us. Below it was the group message. I saved it. Then I reminded Leah again, not to dig for anything privately. She replied that she understood. On the nightstand beside me was the wedding agenda. Ceremony. Cocktail hour. Dinner. Toasts. Dancing. Near the middle of the reception schedule was a line I had not noticed earlier. Family legacy presentation. I read it twice. The wording was strange for a wedding slideshow. It sounded polished. Branded almost. I put the agenda down. By then, I knew enough to be suspicious of almost everything Haley called a family memory. What I still did not know was that the wedding was about to hand me the one thing I had been missing for months. A contradiction Haley would make in public. In front of people she could not later convince they had misunderstood her. I slept badly but woke before my alarm. The morning of the wedding was cool and clear. I dressed at the hotel, drove myself to the venue, and arrived early enough that the ballroom doors were still partly open while staff tested lighting and sound. I had no reason to go inside yet. I was walking past the entrance toward the lobby when the large screen at the far end of the ballroom flickered on. A photograph appeared. I stopped. It was an old childhood picture I had taken years ago at my parents' house. Haley sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, while sunlight fell through the blinds behind her. I had forgotten how young she looked. A technician called to someone near the sound booth and clicked forward. Before the image disappeared, I saw the caption beneath it. Not my name. Not ordinary light. Just 4 words. The Walker Family Archive. The caption stayed on the screen for only a few seconds before the technician clicked to the next image. But it was long enough for me to understand that the slideshow was not just using old family pictures. It was establishing a source. The Walker Family Archive. A phrase broad enough to sound harmless and official at the same time. I stood outside the ballroom doors while 2 staff members tested transitions, and I watched 3 more photographs appear. One was Dad carving a turkey. One was Haley at 14 holding a birthday cake. One was Mom laughing with both hands covered in flour. I had taken all 3. None carried my name. A staff member noticed me and smiled. We're still setting up. Guests aren't supposed to come in yet. Sorry. I stepped away immediately. I did not tell her the photographs were mine. I did not ask to see the file. I did not make the mistake of turning a technical rehearsal into a confrontation that could later be described as me trying to interfere with the wedding. I walked to the lobby, found a quiet chair near the windows, and opened the timeline on my phone. Family legacy presentation uses my photographs, captioned Walker Family Archive. Then I added the time. That was all. The ceremony itself was beautiful in the way expensive weddings often are when enough people have been paid to make beauty look effortless. White flowers lined the aisle. The late afternoon light came through tall windows behind the altar. Haley walked in on Dad's arm, and for the first few seconds I forgot every folder on my laptop and every message saved to my phone. She looked nervous, really nervous. Not polished, not strategic, not like someone building a brand. She looked like my little sister. That was harder than anger would have been. I remembered photographing her first school dance, her graduation, the apartment she rented after college, the afternoon she called me because she had been dumped and did not want Mom to know yet. I remembered taking pictures because that was how I participated in family life. I liked noticing things. I liked preserving moments people did not realize were going to matter until years later. When Aaron saw her walking toward him, his face changed completely. For that moment, I wanted their marriage to work. Both things could be true. I could know Haley had lied about me and still want something good for her. People like clean emotions because they make stories easier to tell. Real families rarely give you that luxury. During the vows, Haley cried. Mom cried harder. Dad looked down at the floor as if that might stop him from joining them. I stayed seated and clapped when everybody else did. Nothing happened. No accusation. No slideshow. No catastrophe. At cocktail hour, Aunt Melissa found me near a high-top table and handed me a glass of sparkling water. You're being very normal, she said. I usually am. That's not what your sister's side of the family has been led to believe. I looked at her. Melissa immediately raised one hand. I'm not starting anything today. Neither am I. She nodded. Good. Then she lowered her voice. For what it's worth, I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner about those messages. I know. I should have. Yes. She winced. You could soften that once in a while. I could. She laughed despite herself. That was the kind of conversation I could handle. No performance, no pretending nothing had happened. Just a person acknowledging what they had done. Leah approached us a few minutes later but did not bring up the complaints. She hugged me, asked whether I liked the ceremony, then went to help move older relatives toward the ballroom. She looked uncomfortable every time Mom passed, and I suspected she was carrying more guilt than I needed her to carry. I had already decided I would not punish people who admitted what they had done, simply because Haley and Mom refused to do the same. Inside the ballroom, the seating arrangement gave me another small lesson in how the day had been curated. I was at a family table. Technically, Mom and Dad were at the head table with Haley and Aaron's wedding party. I sat with Melissa, Leah, 2 cousins, and an uncle from Dad's side. Nothing about the placement was insulting enough to complain about. If I had been looking for evidence of exclusion everywhere, I could have turned it into something. I did not. That mattered too. Not every slight was part of the conspiracy. Not every awkward choice meant Haley had planned it. I was trying very hard not to become the version of myself they had already described. Dinner was served. Toasts began. Aaron's best friend embarrassed him with a story from college. Haley's maid of honor cried through most of hers. Dad gave a speech about how proud he was of Haley's ability to bring people together, and I felt Melissa shift beside me but did not look at her. Mom's toast was worse only because it sounded so sincere. She talked about how Haley had always understood the importance of family, how she remembered birthdays, traditions, recipes, stories, how she had a gift for preserving what mattered. Some people take pictures, Mom said, smiling toward Haley. Haley understands what those moments mean. There was polite laughter. My uncle glanced at me. I picked up my water and took a sip. Mom knew exactly what she had said. I knew it. Melissa knew it. Maybe half the room heard nothing beyond a mother praising her daughter at a wedding. I let it pass. Then the lights dimmed. The large screen behind the dance floor came alive. A title appeared in warm serif letters over a softly blurred photograph. Our story through the years. The same phrase from Leah's old message. My body went still. Haley turned in her chair to face the screen. Mom leaned closer to Dad with an excited smile. Aaron looked at Haley as though he had not seen the final version either. Music started. The first photographs were childhood images of Haley and Aaron separately. His side of the slideshow used ordinary scanned snapshots. School pictures, baseball uniforms, family vacations, awkward teenage haircuts. Nobody pretended they were anything more than old photographs. Then the Walker section began. The difference was immediate. My photographs had sequencing, light, color, movement. They were not snapshots pulled randomly from albums. They had been selected to build a visual story. Dad asleep on the couch with Haley as a child beside him. Mom cooking while Haley leaned over the kitchen island. Haley barefoot on the dock. Christmas lights reflected in the living room window. A summer dinner on the back patio. Each one appeared with a tiny caption near the bottom. Walker Family Archive. Walker Family Archive. Walker Family Archive. I stopped counting after 12. Then I noticed something more personal. I was not in any of them. At first, that was not strange. I had taken most of the photographs. Of course, I was not standing inside the frame. But there were group pictures too. A Christmas dinner I remembered because Melissa had used my camera to take one after I set the exposure for her. I had been standing on the far left. On the screen, the image ended at Leah's shoulder. I had been cropped out. My stomach tightened. The next group photograph came from a lake weekend. I had handed my camera to Dad and stepped beside Mom for exactly one frame. I knew that picture because I had a print of it. On the slideshow, the image had been recropped vertically around Haley and Mom. I was gone again. I leaned slightly toward Melissa. Do you remember the full version of that? She did not take her eyes off the screen. Yes. Leah looked at us from across the table. Another photograph appeared. Graduation. Dad, Mom, Haley, me. Except not me. This crop was tighter than the one I had ever published. That told me something important. These were not simply blog copies that happened to exclude the photographer. Someone had made choices. My absence had been edited. I felt heat rise in my face, but I kept my hands flat on the table. There are humiliations that happen loudly. A speech. An insult. Somebody pointing at you. This was quieter. My sister was showing the room a visual history of our family, built largely from my work, while removing the few pieces of that history where I was visible. The room was seeing everything I had contributed without seeing me. And the worst part was how natural it looked. Nobody gasped. Nobody whispered. Most people had no way to know what was missing. That was the power of a well-made edit. You do not have to lie if you can decide what stays outside the frame. The slideshow moved forward. A photograph from one of the restricted galleries appeared. Then another. Then another. Haley watched the screen with a soft smile. Mom reached across and squeezed her hand. I looked toward Aaron. He was no longer smiling. He had turned slightly toward Haley, then toward the screen, as if he was finally connecting the project he had heard about with the photographs in front of him. At my table, Leah looked sick. I whispered, "Do not do anything." She nodded. Melissa leaned closer. "You want me to get the planner?" "No. They're using your work." "I know. You're not going to stop it?" "Not yet." That answer surprised even me. But by then I understood something Haley apparently did not. Every additional photograph helped me. Every repeated archive caption helped me. Every crop that removed me helped me. If I stood up now, Haley could say it was one misunderstanding. One wedding slideshow. One emotional sister overreacting. If I let it play, the scope would establish itself. The strongest evidence in the room was not going to be something I said. It was going to be what Haley had chosen to show everyone. So I sat still. The sequence shifted into adulthood. Haley at 19. Haley at 21. Haley moving into her first apartment. Haley and Mom decorating a Christmas tree. Then the graduation kitchen photograph appeared. My breath stopped. Mom fastening the necklace behind Haley's neck. Window light across both of their faces. The private photograph. The one I had never posted. The one Haley herself had once disliked. The one she had later told Leah Mom found in the old archive. It filled the screen. Underneath it, Walker Family Archive. I heard Melissa inhale sharply. Leah stared at me. That image changed everything because nobody could claim Haley had casually downloaded it from Ordinary Light. It had never been there. I looked across the room at Mom. She did not meet my eyes. That was enough for me. Not legally. Not professionally. Emotionally. She knew. The slideshow continued. Then I noticed the photographer. Miles Carter had been moving quietly around the reception all evening, changing lenses, photographing reactions, staying almost invisible the way good wedding photographers do. Now he had stopped. His camera hung at his side. He was staring at the screen. A photograph of Haley laughing under string lights had appeared, the summer cookout image from the Keepsake House preview. Miles frowned. The next photograph came up. Dad asleep on the couch. His expression changed. He looked down at something on the back of his camera, then back at the screen. Another image. Mom at the kitchen island. Miles took one step closer. I knew that look. It was the look photographers get when recognition arrives before memory catches up. He was not looking at Haley. He was looking at the photographs. Then he turned slowly, scanning the tables. His eyes moved across the room until they stopped on me. For 1 second, neither of us moved. Then Miles reached into his jacket, pulled out his phone, and unlocked it. Miles looked at his phone, then at the screen again, and I knew he was not checking the wedding schedule. He was searching for something. The slideshow moved through 2 more photographs while his thumb worked quickly. Then he stopped beside the edge of the dance floor, eyes fixed on whatever he had found. The next image appeared. It was one of my favorites from an old Christmas series, Haley leaning against the kitchen counter while Dad reached around her for a stack of plates. Nobody was looking at the camera. That was the whole point. I had always preferred the fraction of a second after people forgot they were being photographed. Miles looked from the photograph to his phone. Then he said, not loudly enough to address the ballroom, but loudly enough for the nearest tables to hear, "Wait." The people closest to him turned. He stepped toward the screen, still holding his phone. I know these images. Haley twisted in her chair. The slideshow kept running for another few seconds before someone near the sound booth lowered the music. I do not know whether the technician heard Miles or simply saw Haley turn around. Either way, the room began noticing that something had changed. Haley gave him a confused smile. What? Miles looked uncomfortable immediately, which made the moment more believable than if he had marched into the middle of the reception like he had been waiting to expose someone. He was a hired photographer, standing in front of a bride on her wedding day. Whatever professional recognition had made him speak had now collided with the realization that nearly 200 people were looking in his direction. I'm sorry, he said. I recognize these. Haley glanced toward the screen. They're just family memories. Miles looked at his phone again. I saw his expression change. Then he turned the screen slightly toward Haley. I follow a photography blog called Ordinary Light. The name moved through me like an electrical current. Aaron looked at Haley. Mom stopped smiling. Dad did not move. Miles scrolled once, then held the phone where Haley could see it. These photographs are on there. Haley gave a quick laugh that was much too light for the room. Well, yeah, my sister posted family pictures on her blog for years. The sentence sounded prepared. Maybe it was. Miles looked down again. They're not just posted there. Haley's smile weakened. He enlarged something on the screen. They're credited. Then he looked toward me. Aaron Walker? My table went completely still. I nodded. Yes. Miles stared at me for half a second, as if he was reconciling a name he had seen hundreds of times with a person sitting 20 feet away. Then he looked back at Haley. So why is your sister's name credited under everyone? Nobody gasped. Real rooms do not react on cue. What happened instead was stranger. Conversations stopped in different pockets. People who had been half watching the slideshow turned fully toward us. Aaron's best man leaned forward. Melissa folded her arms. Leah looked at her lap. Haley's expression hardened. They're family photos, she said. Miles shook his head slightly. I'm not saying they aren't of your family. He looked at me again. I know this work. That sentence landed differently. Mom stood. This is not the time. I had expected her to defend Haley. I had not expected her to move so quickly. Miles immediately lowered his phone. Ma'am, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to interrupt anything. Then don't. Her voice was quiet, but everyone nearby heard it. I stood too. Not because I planned to confront Mom. Because Miles looked like he had suddenly realized he might have destroyed a professional relationship by recognizing the wrong photographs at the wrong wedding. This isn't his problem, I said. Mom turned toward me. Aaron, I'm not starting anything. You're standing up. So are you. Dad said my name from the head table. I ignored him. Haley looked toward the sound booth. Can we just keep going? That was when I made the decision that changed the rest of the evening. I looked directly at her. Do you want the slideshow stopped? She stared at me as if she had not expected me to ask. What? You heard me. The room had become quiet enough that people several tables away could follow the exchange. If you want it stopped, I said, stop it. Haley's eyes narrowed. Why would I stop it? They're family photos. I nodded once. Then let it finish. Mom's face changed. Haley's did too. Because she understood, maybe a second later than I did, what she had just chosen. The slideshow resumed. I sat down. Miles hesitated beside the dance floor, clearly unsure whether he should keep photographing. I gave him the smallest nod I could manage. He returned his phone to his pocket and stepped back toward the perimeter of the room. The next photograph appeared. Walker Family Archive. Then another. Walker Family Archive. The captions that had looked harmless 10 minutes earlier now seemed absurdly loud. At my table, Melissa whispered. You knew this was coming? No. But you knew the photos were yours. Yes. Why are you letting it keep playing? Because she just said publicly she wants it to. Melissa looked toward Haley and understood. That was the difference between reacting and choosing. If I had demanded the slideshow stop, Haley could have spent the rest of the night telling people I had ruined her wedding over credit lines. Now every photograph appeared, because Haley had insisted it continue after being told the photographer was recognized. She owned that decision. The presentation moved through the lake series. The dock. The string lights. The kitchen. Each image existed on ordinary light with my name attached to it. Then came the first crop that had originally included me. A few relatives knew the full photograph. I watched Aunt Carol's face when it appeared. Her eyes moved toward me, then back to the screen. She leaned toward her husband and whispered something. Another cropped group photograph appeared. Leah looked at me. I did not say anything. The room was beginning to see what I had been seeing. Not everyone. Not yet. But enough. Aaron leaned toward Haley. What did you tell the editor? I could not hear her first answer. He said something else. She shook her head sharply. Mom leaned toward them, and I watched Aaron pull slightly away from her. Then the graduation kitchen photograph appeared again. This time, the recognition around my table was immediate because Melissa had seen the private archive image when I showed her weeks earlier. That one was never online, she said. Leah nodded. I heard Aaron ask Haley, where did that come from? Haley answered too softly for me to hear. He looked toward Mom. Mom looked at the screen. The slideshow moved on. That was when I finally saw the full structure. This was not simply a random collection of family photographs. The sequence followed the same emotional architecture I had seen in the keepsake house sample. Origins, traditions, milestones, home, continuity, legacy. The headings were different enough not to look like a sales pitch. But the progression was nearly identical. The wedding slideshow was not only using my work. It was demonstrating what Keepsake House was supposed to do. Wedding guests were not being told they were looking at a business sample. That was what made it clever. Haley could watch which images made people laugh, which ones made Mom cry, which sequences held the room, which stories people mentioned afterward. She could test the emotional effect of the material in front of a perfect audience, family members already invested in the people on the screen. The presentation was a soft launch disguised as sentiment. A slide appeared near the end with several photographs arranged across a cream background. Preserving the stories families live before they realize their history. My stomach tightened. I had seen nearly the same line on the Keepsake House Coming Soon page. Aaron saw it too. He turned slowly toward Haley. This is Keepsake House. It was not a question. Haley said something I could not hear. Aaron shook his head. The music continued. The slideshow ended with a photograph of Haley and Mom walking away from me down a lakeside path. I remembered taking it. I remembered Mom asking me for a print. The screen faded to black. People clapped. Not everyone, but enough that the sound started automatically before the room understood whether applause still made sense. Then the final title appeared, The Walker Family Story, curated by Haley Walker. That was the first time my name appeared nowhere near a collection built almost entirely from my work, while Haley's name appeared as the person responsible for shaping it. I did not feel the explosion of anger I might have expected. I felt clarity. Haley had been careful. She had not written photography by Haley Walker. She had not claimed to press my shutter. She had called herself a curator. She had called my work an archive. She had spent months trying to weaken the connection between the images and ordinary light while building a new context where they could appear under her authority without requiring an explicit lie. That was the plan. Miles was the accident, not a miraculous witness, not a person who knew our family secrets. Just a photographer who happened to recognize a body of work Haley had assumed nobody in that room would recognize professionally. The lights came up. Conversation returned in uneven bursts. Mom moved first. She came toward my table with Dad behind her. This is not happening here. I remained seated. I haven't done anything. You let that man embarrass Haley. I met him today. You knew what he was doing. No. He recognized my photographs. Haley reached us before Mom could answer. Her face was pale. You set that up. That almost made me laugh. With the photographer you hired? You could have told him to stop. I did better than that. I asked you if you wanted the slideshow stopped. Her jaw tightened. You knew what you were doing. Yes. It was the first accusation I accepted without qualification. Haley stared at me. I continued. You said they were family photos and told them to keep playing. You made me look like a thief. No, I haven't called you a thief. That's what everyone thinks now. I looked around the room. Most guests had returned to their conversations, though several were obviously watching us while pretending not to. Aaron had remained at the head table, looking down at his phone. I can't control what they think. Haley laughed bitterly. That's convenient. You've spent 6 months telling people I was possessive about family photographs while using the same photographs for Keepsake House. Her eyes flicked toward Mom. That movement was enough. You knew what Keepsake House was, I said to Mom. We've already discussed this. No, we discussed the drive. Haley stepped closer. Do not do this at my wedding. I'm not the one who put my work on a 50-foot screen. Dad said, Aaron, that's enough. I looked at him. No. What's enough is all of you asking me to stop reacting while nobody asks her to stop doing it. He had no answer. Then Miles approached. He did not come toward Haley. He came toward me, carefully, as if he was aware that every step might make things worse. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I genuinely didn't realize there was a family dispute. There wasn't one you needed to know about. I should have stayed out of it. You recognized your own professional reference point. That's not a crime. He looked uncomfortable. Then he said, Ordinary Light was one of the blogs I followed when I was learning. I stared at him. He smiled awkwardly. There was a series you did years ago. A family cooking dinner. Nobody looking at the camera. I remember it. You wrote about waiting until people stopped performing. I felt something in my throat tighten. Not because he was praising me, because my mother had spent months describing my work as something I already had enough of. Thousands of pictures. A little blog. Family memories. Disposable abondance. And here was a photographer I had never met, telling me something I had made years earlier had changed the way he worked. I learned to wait because of you, Miles said. That's why I recognized the kitchen image. I nodded because speaking immediately would have made my voice unreliable. Thank you. That was all I said. It was enough. Miles excused himself and returned to work. Mom watched him walk away. For once, she had nothing to say about my little blog. Aaron finally came toward us. He held his phone in one hand. Holly. She turned. Not now. No. Now. The tone stopped her. He looked at me first. When did you send the email telling her not to use your work? I gave him the date. He nodded. Then he looked at Haley. You sent me the Keepsake House portfolio before that. Her face changed. What portfolio? Mom asked. Aaron ignored her. You told me Aaron had already threatened the business. Haley folded her arms. Because she had. No. His voice stayed calm. That's the problem. She hadn't. People nearby were listening again. Haley lowered her voice. Aaron, can we please do this upstairs? You told me she was trying to sabotage something she didn't even know existed yet. I told you there had been tension about the photographs. That's not what you said. Mom stepped between them slightly. This can wait. Aaron looked at her. Did you give Haley Aaron's drive? Mom froze. I did not answer for her. That mattered. She needed to own her own words. Finally, she said, I let Haley borrow an old family archive. Aaron looked at me. Was it yours? Yes. His expression hardened. Haley said, It had family photographs on it. I almost answered. Then I realized I no longer needed to. Aaron did. That isn't what I asked. The silence after that was the most satisfying moment of the night. Not because Haley was losing, because for the first time someone she trusted was refusing to accept her vocabulary. Family archive, family memories, family photographs. All the soft phrases that had allowed ownership to disappear. Aaron looked at her and asked, Was the drive Aaron's? Haley did not answer. He nodded slowly. Okay. Then he walked away. Haley started after him. Mom caught her wrist. Give him a minute. Haley pulled free. No. She followed him toward the hallway. Dad looked exhausted. Mom looked furious. Neither of them looked at me. I returned to my chair. Melissa stared at me. That's it? What do you mean? You're just going to sit down? Yes. Aren't you going to say something? I already did. And I had. The wedding continued. The band played. Dinner plates disappeared. Eventually, people danced. Haley returned 20 minutes later without Aaron. She smiled for photographs and moved through conversations like nothing had happened. Mom stayed close to her. I did not approach either of them again. Near the end of the reception, Leah sat beside me. Are you okay? I will be. She looked toward Haley. I'm sorry. You already apologized for what you did. I know. I'm apologizing because I'm finally seeing how much of this I helped make possible. I looked at her. That's different. She nodded. I left shortly before midnight. No dramatic exit. No final confrontation. I drove myself back to my hotel, took off my shoes, and opened my laptop. Then I created a new document. Not for social media. Not for the family. For myself. At the top, I wrote, What the wedding established. Below it, I listed only facts. Haley personally approved final slideshow the night before. Slideshow used numerous ordinary light photographs. Multiple images previously targeted by privacy complaints appeared. At least one unpublished image from Gray Drive archive appeared. Several known group images were cropped to remove me. Final presentation credited Walker Family Archive and curated by Haley Walker. Presentation structure and language mirrored Keepsake House materials. Haley publicly chose to continue, after Miles identified Ordinary Light and my authorship. Miles independently recognized work. Aaron questioned Haley about timeline inconsistency. Laura acknowledged giving Haley my drive. I read the list once. Then I closed the laptop. At 9 the next morning, someone knocked on my hotel room door. Mom stood outside. Dad was behind her. Neither had called first. Mom walked past me before I invited her in. She put her phone face down on the little table beside the window. Fix this, Aaron. I looked at her. What exactly do you think I broke? One of Haley's prospective partners emailed her this morning asking who owns the photographs in the Keepsake House samples. Dad shut the door. Mom continued. Aaron won't answer her calls. Haley is hysterical. People are talking. You've made your point. I thought about 6 months of complaints. The Gray Drive. The cropped photographs. The private image. The wedding. The lie Haley had told Aaron before I even knew Keepsake House existed. Then I looked at my mother and said the sentence I had not understood the night before. I hadn't made my point yet. Mom stayed in my hotel room for less than 20 minutes that morning. But by the time she left, she had managed to make one thing perfectly clear. She was still treating the consequences as something I had caused by refusing to cooperate, not something Haley had caused by using my work and lying about it. I asked which prospective partner had contacted Haley and what they had actually requested. Mom said she did not know, because Haley was too upset to explain every detail. Dad stood near the door and said almost nothing. When I asked whether either of them had told the partner anything about where the photographs came from, Mom snapped, "That's not our job." I told her she was right. It was not. Then I reminded her that the only reason anyone was asking was because Miles had recognized work that already carried my name publicly. Nobody needed me to accuse Haley, I said. They could open Ordinary Light themselves. Mom asked me again to fix it. I told her I would correct anything inaccurate about my work, but I would not tell anyone Haley had permission she never had. That was the point where she picked up her phone and walked out. Dad stayed behind long enough to say, "This is getting bigger than anybody wanted." I looked at him and said, "It was already big, you just wanted it quiet." He did not argue. I checked out of the hotel around noon and drove home. I had barely put my bag down when Aaron emailed me. The subject line was simply, "Keepsake House." The message itself was short. He said he was forwarding something Haley had sent him months earlier because, after what happened at the wedding, he no longer trusted his own understanding of when the project began or what I had supposedly approved. He did not ask me to take action. He did not apologize for Haley. He wrote, "I need to know what I was told versus what was true." Attached below his message was an original email thread from late August, complete with the date it had reached his inbox and the people copied on it. The attachment was titled, "Keepsake House Founding Portfolio." That mattered more to me than any metadata inside the PDF. I was looking at the actual thread Aaron had received before the complaints began. Before my conversation with Haley about taking galleries down, and months before I knew Keepsake House existed. The portfolio was 32 pages long. I read all of them once without taking notes, then went back through it slowly. Haley had built a polished concept around curated family story books, wedding legacy films, memory packages, and what she called visual heritage experiences. The language was clean. The layouts were elegant. And my photographs were everywhere. The doc image, the Thanksgiving kitchen series, the string light cookout, Dad asleep on the couch, the unpublished graduation photograph of Mom fastening Haley's necklace. Every time source language appeared, it said Walker Family Archive. Some pages showed sample service packages using those photographs as proof of concept. Others showed mock-ups for family albums and referral material that looked very close to the sequencing later used in the wedding slideshow. 2 outside contacts had been copied on the original email thread, a small print production company and a planner who handled family events and milestone celebrations. Aaron had replied to the August email asking whether the images were cleared for use. Haley had answered that they were family archive materials and that family use had already been cleared. He had apparently accepted that. I forwarded him exactly one sentence. "I never cleared commercial use." He responded 15 minutes later. "I understand." Then another message came. "I'm staying somewhere else for a few days. I need distance before Haley and I talk about this again." I did not tell him to leave her. I did not ask where he was staying. His marriage was not my revenge mechanism, and I had no intention of making it one. What mattered to me was the email thread itself. Haley had been using my work to build Keepsake House in August, while telling Aaron I had already objected to the business. That was impossible because she had created my objection before I had even learned the project existed. By then, I had enough evidence that no single document needed to carry the entire story. The August portfolio showed early use. The complaints showed coordinated pressure later. My November boundary email showed I explicitly withheld commercial permission. Haley's reply, "I'm not using your work," showed she denied doing what the August portfolio proved she had already done. That afternoon, I built a provenance package. Not a revenge folder. Not a family history. Provenance. For each photograph relevant to Keepsake House, I paired the original RAW file or archived source with my cloud backup date, any prior publication date on Ordinary Light, and the specific place the image later appeared in Haley's material. I added the complaint dates beside the same images where applicable. Then I added my boundary email and Haley's denial. I included the wedding presentation only where it demonstrated public use after the complaints. Miles had sent me a brief email that morning. After I asked whether he was comfortable confirming only what he personally knew. His message said he had independently recognized several images as work he had previously seen on Ordinary Light, looked up the blog during the reception, and identified Aaron Walker as the credited photographer. Nothing more. He did not claim to know who stole what, who owned which drive, or what Haley intended. That restraint made his statement useful. I submitted clean appeals to the hosting service for the family galleries still restricted. I did not ask them to decide the entire family dispute. I explained that several complaints had been coordinated, provided the written messages showing common wording, clarified that individual subjects were still free to request review of specific images involving themselves, and asked the host to distinguish those individual concerns from broad claims suggesting I had no legitimate relationship to the work. Then I looked at the August email thread Aaron had forwarded. Because the two outside contacts were actually copied on that thread, I did not have to guess who had received the portfolio. I sent each of them a short provenance notice. I did not call Haley a thief. I did not tell them to stop working with her. I said I was the photographer who created the listed images appearing in the deck they had received, that I had not authorized commercial use by Keepsake House, and that I could provide source files and publication history if they needed to verify attribution before proceeding. There was one more email I sent that day, and I sent it because of what I had watched Haley approve the night before the wedding. I contacted the wedding planner and the freelance editor who had assembled the slideshow. I told them I was not asking them to take sides in a family conflict. I asked only whether they had retained any revision history or approval correspondence, showing how image credits and cropping decisions had been provided or approved. The editor replied late that afternoon. She said there were revision emails and at least 2 approval versions in the project archive, but she needed time to gather the relevant chain because the instructions had come from more than one family contact. She said she would send what she could once she organized it. I thanked her and stopped there. At that point, I knew such a record existed. I did not yet know what it would show. For about 6 hours, I thought Haley might choose silence. Then she posted. The statement went up on her personal page first and appeared on the Keepsake House account shortly afterward. It was long enough to sound thoughtful and polished enough that I doubted she had written it in one emotional burst. She said she had spent years watching private family memories turned into public content without everyone feeling able to object. She said multiple relatives had asked for images to be removed and had been ignored or made uncomfortable. She said that when she tried to create something positive from our own family history, I had responded by weaponizing ownership and professional status against my younger sister. The line people repeated most was near the end. These images are our lives, not one person's property to use as leverage when family stops obeying her. I read it twice. Then I checked the comments. Laura shared Haley's statement with the words, "There are always 2 sides to a family story." Dad did not share it. Instead, he called me. "Don't answer publicly," he said. "Why?" "Because this will blow over if both of you stop." Haley just accused me publicly of exploiting the family and ignoring repeated requests. You know what she means. No, I know what she wrote. Aaron, please. If I stay silent, that statement becomes the only public version attached to my name and my work. You don't have to win every argument. I'm not trying to win an argument. I'm correcting a factual accusation. He sighed. Your mother is beside herself. Then she should tell Haley to take down the lie. Dad went quiet. I waited. He finally said, I'm asking you not to make this worse. That's what you asked me before the wedding, too. He had no answer to that. I ended the call and went back to Haley's page. The comments were doing something Haley had probably not expected. Most people were supportive because most people commenting knew her. But a few questions came from photographers and wedding vendors who had apparently seen the reception discussions circulate privately. One person asked, Did Aaron actually take the photographs? Haley replied, Some of them, yes, but that's not the point. Another person asked whether the images had been used in Keepsake House business materials. Haley answered, They were family archive materials I had every right to use. A third comment asked the obvious question I had been asking for months. If the family was uncomfortable with Erin publishing those photographs, why were the same images being used to promote Haley's project? Haley replied that I was twisting a private family dispute to damage a new business. I took screenshots. I did not comment. That was when the last bit of uncertainty left me. Haley was no longer speaking indirectly through mom, complaint templates, or private decks. She was publicly saying she had every right to use the material after denying in writing that she was using my work at all. She had moved the conflict from a private disagreement into a public record herself. I still gave her one chance. I sent the message by email and text, so there could be no argument about whether she received it. Correct the public accusation. State that I created the photographs you used. Remove my work from Keepsake House materials. Tell the people you contacted that I did not steal a family archive and that you did not have my permission for commercial use. If you do that by tomorrow evening, I will not publish the timeline of complaints and use. I stared at the message for a while before sending it. It was more generous than I felt. Not because I wanted to protect Haley from consequences, but because I wanted the next step to belong entirely to her. If she corrected the record, I would still maintain my boundaries. I would still restrict access to my archive. I would still expect Keepsake House to rebuild without my work. But I would not publicly lay out 6 months of contradictions if she was willing to stop lying about me. For nearly 2 hours, she did not reply. Then Mom called and added Haley to the call before I could object. "You are bullying your sister into admitting she stole something," Mom said. "I did not use the word stole. That is exactly what you are implying." I asked her to say who created the photographs and whether I authorized commercial use. "They are our family photographs," Haley said. "Did I take them? That isn't the point. It is one of the points. You always need your name on everything." "No. I need my name not removed from my own work while you accuse me of exploiting you for making it." Mom cut in. "She's trying to build a life, Erin. Suemi, you already have one." The sentence was so familiar I almost laughed. Haley said, "You want me to humiliate myself publicly because some photographer recognized pictures at my wedding. No, I want you to correct a statement you chose to publish." I told the truth. "You said relatives repeatedly asked me for years to remove photographs and I ignored them." "Name the requests." She went quiet. I continued. "Melissa asked once. I removed it. The divorced cousin asked once. I removed it. Haley, you personally told me at lunch that you did not want your photographs removed. That was before you turned this into a business fight." "No, that was while you were already building Keepsake House," Mom said. "Enough." I surprised both of them by agreeing. "Yes, enough." I told Haley the deadline still stood. I told Mom I was not discussing it again. Then I ended the call. The next evening, less than an hour before the deadline, Haley texted me. "I'm not taking back the truth because you don't like it." I read the message once and answered with one word. "Okay." Then I opened Ordinary Light. The statement I published was less than 800 words. I removed 3 paragraphs before posting because they explained Mom's favoritism and Dad's passivity, and neither was necessary to correct Haley's claims. I did not include childhood stories. I did not mention Erin's temporary separation. I did not share the private family remarks that would have embarrassed Haley without proving anything. I used dates. On October 6, the first gallery was restricted after a privacy complaint. On October 19, Haley told me she personally did not object to photographs of her remaining on Ordinary Light. In August, before those complaints, Keepsake House Materials already used photographs I created and labeled them Walker Family Archive. On November 21, after learning Keepsake House existed, I told Haley in writing that she did not have permission to use my photographs commercially. She replied, "I'm not using your work." On April 18, the wedding slideshow publicly displayed the same photographs, including an unpublished image from a private archive, and identified the presentation as curated by Haley. Afterward, Haley publicly stated that she had every right to use those materials. I attached only the necessary redacted screenshots. At the bottom, I wrote, I am not asking anyone to contact or harass members of my family. I am correcting the record because public claims were made about my conduct and my work. Individual relatives remain free to raise genuine privacy concerns with me directly. What I will not accept is the use of coordinated privacy complaints to suppress the source of photographs that were simultaneously being repurposed for another person's commercial project. Then I hit publish. Nothing exploded. That was important. There were no thousands of strangers storming Haley's page. Nobody called the police. No company vanished overnight. What happened was slower and far more useful. The print production contact from the August thread emailed Haley and copied me, asking for confirmation that every image in the sample portfolio could legally and contractually be used before they produced additional material. The referral planner said she was pausing further discussion until Keepsake House could provide a clean portfolio with documented source rights. A prospective contact Haley had been speaking with privately decided not to move forward until provenance was resolved. The hosting service acknowledged my appeal and said the affected galleries would remain under review while it considered the new information. It did not instantly restore everything, which was fine with me. By the end of the week, most of my photographs had disappeared from the Keepsake House preview page. Without them, the brand looked very different. The warm, multi-generational archive was gone. The intimate kitchen scenes were gone. The cohesive visual history that made Haley look as though she had been curating family memory for years was gone. What remained was typography, sample package names, a few generic detail photographs, and promises about what the service would eventually become. Haley messaged me, "Happy now?" I did not answer. Aaron emailed 2 days later to say he had canceled the personal launch contribution he had planned to make after the honeymoon. The money had never been transferred, and he did not want his name presented as a supporter of the business while he and Haley were trying to determine what she had told him. He did not say their marriage was over. He said they were living separately for the moment and had agreed to counseling if they were going to figure out what came next. Again, I did not tell him what he should do. The point was never to take Haley's husband. The point was to stop her from taking my work. Laura called that evening. "You could have kept this private." I was standing in my kitchen, making dinner while she spoke. It was private until Haley published a lie about me. She was defending herself. So was I. You didn't have to contact the people she was working with. They already had my photographs. I contacted only the people who had received them. You knew what that would do. I knew they would ask her to prove she had permission. That's the same thing. No, it isn't. Her voice cracked with frustration. This is tearing the family apart. I put down the knife I was using and leaned against the counter. No, Mom. People finding out they were told different stories is tearing apart the version of the family you were managing. She went quiet. Then she said something that told me the next stage had already begun. We need everyone in one room. I almost laughed. Why? Because relatives are calling each other instead of calling me, and everybody thinks something different happened. That sounds useful. Aiden, I mean it. Maybe they should talk to each other. Laura said there would be a family meeting at my parents' house that weekend. Haley would be there. Dad, Leah, Melissa. Several relatives who had filed complaints. Aaron might come for part of it, though she said he had not committed. You need to bring whatever you think proves your side, Mom said. I looked at the timeline on my laptop. For 6 months, Laura had told me everyone agreed. Everyone was uncomfortable. Everyone thought I had gone too far. Everyone believed the photographs belonged to the family. Now, for the first time, all of those people were going to be sitting in the same room where Laura could no longer speak for them one at a time. I'll bring one copy, I said. Mom hesitated. One copy of what? The timeline. I could hear her breathing on the other end. Then she said, Fine, we're going to settle this. After we hung up, I opened the folder containing the complaint screenshots and read through the names again. Melissa had never filed one. Leah had filed because she thought everyone else already had. Daniel had never told me which photograph bothered him. Another cousin had repeated language Haley supplied. Mom had built 6 months of pressure around a word nobody had ever stopped to test. Everyone. That night, I printed the timeline, placed it in a plain folder, and set it beside my keys. For months, I had been trying to prove what Haley had done. At that meeting, I was finally going to ask a simpler question. How many people in my family had ever actually agreed with her before Laura told them everyone else already did? The family meeting was held on Sunday afternoon at my parents' house, which already made it feel more formal than anything our family had ever done voluntarily. Mom had arranged chairs in a loose circle in the living room, as if she were preparing for group therapy, except nobody had agreed she was the facilitator. Dad stood near the fireplace with his arms folded. Haley sat on the far end of the couch, beside an empty space that I assumed had been meant for Aaron. Melissa chose a chair near the window. Leah sat beside her. Daniel and 2 other cousins who had submitted complaints arrived within minutes of each other, all looking like people who had been told there would be a difficult conversation without being told exactly why they were necessary to it. I put my plain folder on the coffee table and sat down without opening it. Mom waited until everyone had a drink before beginning. I asked everyone here because this has gotten completely out of control. She looked around the room, pausing just long enough at each face to remind us that this was her house and, historically, her version of events tended to become the family version if nobody interrupted quickly enough. Whatever happened with the photographs and Haley's project, we need to stop attacking each other. Erin has made her concerns clear, Haley has made hers clear, and now partners are backing away. Family pictures are being dragged into a public argument, and people are choosing sides. I'm not asking anyone to choose a side, I said. Mom's mouth tightened. Can I finish? Yes. She looked at Haley. Haley is willing to rebuild Keepsake House without any photographs Erin objects to. I turned toward my sister. Any photographs I object to? Haley stared at me. You know what she means. I do. I want everyone else to hear the difference. Mom exhaled. Fine. Without Erin's photographs. That was better. Then Mom added, in return, Erin needs to withdraw the complaints she made to Haley's business contacts and stop suggesting the family was manipulated. Leah shifted in her chair. I looked at Mom. I didn't file complaints against Haley with her contacts. I told people who had received my photographs that I had not authorized their commercial use, which had the same effect. No. The effect came from them asking Haley whether she could prove she had permission. Haley leaned forward. You knew what would happen. Yes. At least, that part had never been in dispute. Mom raised one hand. This is exactly what I'm talking about. We could argue every sentence for another 6 months. I don't need to. I opened the folder. Mom's eyes dropped to it. I took out a single printed timeline and placed it on the coffee table. There's one question I want answered before anyone asks me to retract anything. Nobody spoke. I looked at Daniel first. When you submitted your privacy complaint, which photograph did you personally want removed? His face changed. I don't remember the exact one. You never answered when I asked you that in October. I know. Were you personally upset about a specific photograph? Daniel rubbed one hand over his knee. Laura said several people were uncomfortable with the galleries. Mom turned toward him. That's not what I said. He looked at her. You said people had been uncomfortable for years. I said if anyone was uncomfortable, they should speak up. That's not how I took it. I did not interrupt them. I turned to my cousin Rebecca, whose name had been attached to another request. What about you? She glanced toward Mom, then Haley. I thought Leah had already complained. Leah stared at her. Why would you think that? Haley told me there were already several requests. Leah gave a short, disbelieving laugh. I filed mine because Aunt Laura said several people had already raised concerns. The room changed. Not dramatically. No one shouted. People simply started looking at one another instead of looking at Mom. Daniel frowned. Wait. I thought Melissa was one of the people who started this. Melissa sat forward. I never filed anything. He stared at her. Laura told me you'd had problems with Erin posting photos. I had one problem years ago. I called Erin. She took the picture down the same day. Rebecca looked at Mom. You told me Melissa had always been uncomfortable. Mom's face hardened. She had been. That isn't the same thing as filing complaints now. No one said she filed. Daniel shook his head. That's absolutely what I thought. Haley stood. This is ridiculous. Everyone looked at her. She crossed her arms. Nobody forced any of you to submit anything. You're all sitting here acting like you got hypnotized. Leah flushed. You sent me the wording. I helped you write it. You sent me the gallery link too. Because you were in the gallery. You told me everyone else was doing it. I said several people had concerns. Rebecca said. You told me Daniel had already sent one. Daniel turned. You told me Rebecca was considering it. For the first time, Haley did not have an answer ready. That was the moment the word everyone finally collapsed. There had never been an organic group of relatives independently demanding that my work come down. There had been Mom creating the impression that a consensus already existed, Haley giving people the language and links to act on it, and relatives assuming they were joining a majority instead of helping manufacture one. I looked at Mom. How many people came to you first? She did not answer. Before you started telling relatives other people were uncomfortable, how many people had independently contacted you asking for my galleries to be removed? Mom's eyes moved toward Dad. He did not help her. Laura? Melissa said quietly. Mom looked at her. How many? Mom's voice dropped. Haley had concerns. I turned toward Haley. You told me directly you did not want your photographs removed. That was about my own pictures. So whose concerns started this? Haley's jaw tightened. Nobody answered. I looked around the room. That's the only reason I wanted everyone here. You were told everyone agreed before most of you had even decided what you thought. Mom stood. That is a very convenient way to frame it. No, it's a question with dates. She stared at the timeline. Then Dad spoke. I knew Laura was encouraging people to make requests. Every head turned toward him. Mom looked stunned. Patrick. He rubbed his forehead. I knew Haley was helping. I didn't know all the wording was being copied. I looked at him. You knew enough to ask no questions. His face tightened. I know. That was different from the last time. Not defensive. Not evasive. Just true. Before anyone could respond, my phone vibrated. I almost ignored it until I saw the sender. The wedding editor. I had asked her days earlier for any revision record she could legitimately provide. She had finally sent it. I opened the email but did not immediately show anyone. There were 2 attached screenshots from her project management thread. The first was from Mom. Please keep the Walker section focused on Haley and the family story. Aaron doesn't need to be in this. Crop where necessary. The second came the following day from Haley after the editor sent a revised proof. This version works. Keep Mom's edits. Final approved. I read both twice. There were also thumbnail previews attached to the approval thread showing the 3 group photographs before and after cropping. So that was the last question answered. Mom had initiated the instruction. Haley had knowingly approved it. I set the phone down. Haley watched my face. What? The editor sent the approval chain. Mom went pale. What approval chain? Daniel asked. I looked at Haley. Do you want me to answer? She said nothing. I turned the phone so Melissa and Leah could see first, then passed it across the room. Nobody needed commentary. The messages were simple. When the phone reached Dad, he read Mom's instruction, then Haley's approval. He closed his eyes for a second before passing it back. Rebecca looked at Haley. You actually removed Aaron from the pictures? They were crops for a slideshow. 3 different pictures? It was about visual consistency. Melissa laughed once. Don't. Haley's face flushed. What do you want me to say? It was my wedding. And those were her photographs, Leah said, of our family. The old phrase again. Except it did not work anymore. Daniel leaned back. So you were trying to get Erin's galleries restricted while building a business with her pictures. Then you used them at the wedding and cut her out of the ones where she was actually visible. Haley looked toward Mom. Mom immediately stepped in. This is turning into a pile-on. And she was right. Not about the facts. About the room. People had begun talking over one another. Rebecca wanted to know whether her complaint had helped restrict a gallery Haley later used. Daniel wanted confirmation that his name had never been presented to a business contact. Melissa was angry about the way her old disagreement with me had been used to make other relatives think she supported the campaign. Leah was near tears. Haley sat down again. surrounded by the consequences of everyone finally comparing stories. I could have let it continue. A few months earlier, I might have thought that was justice. Instead, I stood. Stop. Nobody heard me the first time. I said it again. Stop. The room quieted. I looked at Daniel, Rebecca, Leah, Melissa, then at the others. I'm not asking anyone here to punish Haley. Haley looked up at me. I'm not asking anyone to stop speaking to her, destroy her business, choose me over her, or decide what should happen to her marriage. I'm asking you to stop helping her punish me. Nobody moved. If you genuinely want a photograph of yourself removed from something I control, ask me. I will handle that with you directly. If you don't want Haley using your images for Keepsake House, tell her. If you do, tell her. But stop making decisions because Mom says everyone else has already made them. Rebecca nodded slowly. Daniel said, I'm withdrawing mine. I looked at him. Because you don't personally want it? Because I never had a specific image I wanted removed. I thought I was supporting something the family had already agreed on. Rebecca said she would do the same. Leah had already contacted the host before the meeting to clarify that her complaint had been based on incomplete information. I had not asked her to. Melissa looked at Mom. You don't get to use me as evidence for what the family thinks anymore. Mom flinched. That sentence hurt her more than anything I could have said because family consensus had always been one of her tools. She rarely ordered people around directly. She told us what everybody else supposedly needed, felt, or believed until disagreement started to feel antisocial. Dad sat down beside her. Haley stared at the floor. Then she said, You got what you wanted. I looked at her. What do you think I wanted? My business is basically dead. Aaron moved out. Half the family thinks I manipulated them. Everybody knows those pictures are yours. Congratulations. I shook my head. Your business isn't dead because my pictures are gone. She looked up. You can still build Keepsake House. With what? That was the question underneath everything. I answered quietly. With your work. Her expression hardened. I continued before she could interrupt. You said I destroyed everything you built. I didn't. I removed everything I built. Whatever is left is yours. No one spoke. Haley looked away first. I picked up my folder. Mom stood again. You're leaving? Yes. We haven't resolved anything. I have. She looked genuinely wounded. After everything, you're just walking out? I'm not staying for everyone to decide what my boundary should be. What boundary? You do not get access to my archive anymore. Neither does Haley. If Dad wants a photograph, he can ask me directly. If you want one, you can ask. I'll decide case by case. Mom stared at me. You're cutting us off from our own family history. No, I'm cutting you off from treating my archive like a supply closet. Dad nodded once. Mom looked at him as if his silence were betrayal. Then she said, I'm sorry this got so out of hand. I almost walked away. Instead, I turned back. That isn't an apology for what you did. Her mouth opened. I'm sorry you were hurt. That isn't either. Aaron, what do you want from me? The truth. I left before she could manufacture one under pressure. For several weeks, Mom and I barely spoke. The hosting service eventually restored most of the restricted galleries after several relatives clarified their complaints, although I kept some older family work private anyway. Not because Haley had won the privacy argument. Because I had changed. Informal family trust was no longer enough for me to build professional systems around. I tightened my consent process and separated personal archives from anything public far more carefully. Keepsake House did not disappear overnight. Haley removed my photographs and postponed the public launch. The print company declined to produce additional samples until she had a portfolio she could document. The planner who had been considering referrals moved on. Haley could have rebuilt. Maybe one day she still will. But the version she had created around 15 years of my visual history could not survive without those images. Aaron and Haley remained separated for a while and started counseling. I never asked for details. Their marriage belonged to them. Dad called me alone about a month after the family meeting. I've been thinking about what you said. That sounds dangerous. He laughed weakly. Then he became serious. I spent years thinking staying out of conflict made me fair. I waited. It just meant whoever pushed hardest got what they wanted. That was the closest thing to a real apology Dad had ever given me without being prompted. I won't have a relationship with you based on what you're willing not to know, I told him. I understand. And, slowly, he began acting like he did. Mom took longer. Almost 3 months after the wedding, she came to my apartment carrying nothing. No food, no excuse about being nearby, no message from Haley. She sat at my kitchen table and said, "I gave Haley the drive because I thought you could afford to share." I said nothing. I helped make people think you were being unreasonable because it was easier than admitting I wanted her business to work. Still, I waited. Mom looked down at her hands. And I asked the editor to take you out of the slideshow because I thought it should stay focused on Haley. She saw the final version. She approved it. I knew exactly what I was asking them to do. That was the first time she had said all of it without softening any noun. No family archive. No misunderstanding. No things got out of hand. Just actions. I nodded. That's the first true apology you've given me. Mom cried. I did not rush around the table to comfort her. I also did not ask her to leave. Some relationships are repaired by forgiveness. Others begin with finally refusing to call an admission cruel simply because it arrives late. By August, 4 months after the wedding, my family was smaller in the way that mattered and larger in another. People contacted one another directly more often. When Mom said everybody thought something, Melissa had developed the habit of asking, "Who?" Dad had stopped carrying plates into the kitchen whenever a difficult conversation started. Leah and I were not suddenly best friends. But she no longer avoided me out of embarrassment. For my birthday, a few of us met at Melissa's house for dinner. Nothing elaborate. Dad came, Leah came, Mom came alone. Haley did not. After dessert, I automatically reached for my camera. Old habit. Melissa saw me. "Oh no." "What?" She held out her hand. "Give it here. You don't know how to use this." "I know which button makes the picture happen." That is a horrifying description. Leah laughed. I looked around the table and raised the camera again. Melissa kept her hand out. Aiden. I knew what she was doing. For years, when somebody said we needed a picture, I had answered the same way. "I'm fine back here." Behind the camera was useful. Behind the camera was familiar. Behind the camera meant nobody had to make room for me, because I had already given myself a job. Melissa tilted her head. "You're in this family too. Get in the picture." My first instinct was still to say I was fine. This time, I stopped myself. I placed the camera in her hand, walked around the table, and stood between Dad and Leah. Mom shifted slightly so there was room. Melissa lifted the camera. Nobody arranged themselves perfectly. Dad was still laughing. Leah was pushing hair away from her face. Mom had one hand half raised as if she had been about to say something. The shutter clicked. For once, I did not know exactly what the photograph looked like. I was inside it. When your family benefits from your work, love does not require you to surrender ownership, boundaries, or the truth. You can listen to concerns without accepting manipulation, and you can correct lies without becoming cruel. Document what matters, ask direct questions, and let people face the consequences of their own choices. If this story gave you something to think about, subscribe to the channel for more stories and hard-earned lessons.